Consequently, Dumbledore, the man in the dungeon, and my two shadows, Granger and Weasley, closely monitored my actions over the following period. They all seemed to feel that my behavior had become strange again. In their eyes, I looked very absent-minded during class. In reality, I was simply multitasking. If a professor called on me to speak, my reflexes took over and I answered everything correctly, much to their annoyance. After class, I didn't talk much to my friends. Instead, I spent my time scribbling and drawing on parchment. To them, it looked like idle doodling. In truth, I was mapping out the plumbing of the castle, trying to recall the exact layout of the pipes leading to the Chamber of Secrets. If asked what Harry was most focused on right now, Granger and Weasley would definitely say it was how to pursue Professor Snape. Therefore, they considerately decided not to pry into my behavior, treating me like a fragile, lovesick invalid. However, that wasn't the case with my former self. I didn't need a crystal ball to know exactly what was happening in the headmaster's office. I knew him. I knew his patience had reached its limit. He would have stormed into the office, his expression thunderous, and roared at the old man. "Albus, you had better control that troll-brained brat. He is just as arrogant, conceited, reckless, and stupid as the elder Potter." Dumbledore would have tried to calm him down, likely offering a lemon drop, but my other self would be disgusted. He would sneer coldly. "Have you not observed the castle this past week? Potter goes night wandering every single night, wearing that—" He would pause there, his expression growing even more repulsed, recalling the silvery cloak that James Potter used to strut around in. Wearing that cloak of his, wandering everywhere. The library, the astronomy tower, abandoned classrooms. He is completely brazen. I have encountered him several times already. I had indeed been brazen. I had run into him multiple times while scouting the second floor, and each time he had let me go, likely paralyzed by the lingering confusion of the Veritaserum incident and my confession. But that hesitation wouldn't last forever. I could picture the scene perfectly. Dumbledore would ask why he hadn't exposed me right then and there. My other self would stiffen, hissing some excuse about suspecting Dumbledore had a plan, but deep down, he was annoyed at his own inaction. He was annoyed that I, Harry Potter, was suddenly avoiding him. For a man who claimed to detest me, he certainly spent a lot of time looking for me. During flying lessons, while I hovered on a broomstick, a detestable activity but one this body excelled at, I could feel a gaze burning from the castle windows. From the high stone window on the 8th floor, a figure was watching. He was searching through the patch of Gryffindor red. He felt slighted. I knew the twisted logic of his mind. Just because his attitude had softened slightly, just because he had said, "I know," I had started wandering the castle at night without restraint. Had I finally revealed my true nature? Just like the elder Potter, he would be thinking, craving the spotlight, reckless and arrogant, utterly detestable. Indeed, still a brat of the Potter family. He wanted to catch me. He wanted to deduct points to restore the status quo. He wanted to prove that I was just another rule-breaking Gryffindor. So, he decided to hunt. That night, I didn't disappoint him. I wrapped the invisibility cloak around myself and headed for the second floor. I knew he was there. I could practically smell the ozone of his suppression spells. He was concealing himself in the shadows, waiting. He had noticed my pattern. I always ended up on the second floor. I walked silently, my breath shallow. Moonlight spilled in from the windows, illuminating the corridor. I reached my destination. I paused for a moment, listening. I heard the faintest intake of breath from the shadows behind me. He was following. Good. I turned the handle and walked into the room. Behind me, I sensed his hesitation. I sensed his absolute bewilderment, because the room I had just entered was the girls' lavatory, Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. I could imagine the gears grinding in his head. What is Potter doing entering a girls' lavatory in the middle of the night? Could it be he had some hidden deviant tendencies? Impossible, he would argue with himself. Potter's orientation was clearly, he was thinking of my confession to him. So was I a pervert, a voyeur, or just insane?
I suppressed a smirk as I walked toward the sinks. I knew he was standing at the door, paralyzed by a mixture of confusion and secondhand embarrassment. He hesitated for a split second, then his curiosity, or perhaps his desire to catch me in a scandalous act, won out. The door creaked. He strode in after me.
When Severus Snape stepped into the girls' lavatory with a hesitant and conflicted heart, possibly for the first time in his life, I, lurking in the shadows of the chamber below, knew exactly what he was feeling. I was gone. Under the moonlight, he saw only a large, circular hole gaping open in the middle of the sinks in the center of the lavatory. It was pitch black, a maw leading to the bowels of the castle. Snape was certain the original architecture here was not like this. Cautiously, he drew his wand and stepped forward. Another one, and a male professor too? Why do you always have to come here in the middle of the night? The terrible scream of moaning Myrtle rang out. The pearl-white ghost rushed out from a toilet stall, crossing her arms timidly and neurotically, staring intently at him as if he were a pervert. I imagined his cheek twitching in annoyance. His face would be thoroughly black by now. "Always have to come here?" he asked, forcing the words out through gritted teeth. "What does the other person always come here for? Tell me." Annoyed as he was, he grasped the key point. That person was definitely that damned Potter. "He always says things no one can understand to that sink, hissing and then jumps into that hole," Myrtle complained, distressed. "He does it every day. He doesn't say a single word to me, even though this is where I live." Before she could continue her ghostly flirtation, she saw the black-robed man jump down the hole with a cold face. "Here he comes." I waited at the bottom. I heard the slide. He was sliding through the network of pipes. I knew he would concentrate to keep himself in the main pipe, resisting the urge to light his wand and reveal his position. When he finally slid to the bottom, just as his boots hit the bone-strewn floor and he prepared to stand up, I cast a non-verbal disarming charm. It was reflex. He couldn't dodge in time, but fortunately, he was Severus Snape. He was prepared. He immediately cast a Protego on himself. The spell bounced off the shield with a crack. He agilely drew his wand, took a few steps forward into the darkness, and called out through gritted teeth, "Potter!" The air was silent for a few seconds. "Lumos," I whispered. A light bloomed in the darkness, illuminating my face. I raised my wand and said, somewhat dejectedly, "Professor, you recognized it was me." He took another step closer, looking down at me intensely. A smile that didn't reach his eyes played on his lips. "Who else but you can speak Parseltongue?" My lips moved, wanting to retort. "And also like to enter the Hogwarts girls' lavatory in the middle of the night?" he added with a gloomy face. "Perhaps also, Professor, you yourself?" I asked in a low voice, aiming for innocent confusion. He glared expressionlessly at me. Professor, it's getting late. We should head back," I said quickly, changing the subject under his stare. "No rush, Potter," he said dangerously, his voice low and silky. "Can you tell your wary potions professor why you come here every day? And what is this place?" I didn't speak immediately. "For your night wandering and attacking a professor, 100 points from Gryffindor." "Then I definitely can't say," I perked up internally. He narrowed his eyes. "Unmoved by point deductions? Do you think Gryffindor gained a lot of points this time? Furthermore, Potter, have you considered, after I tell Albus about this, will you be expelled from school?" "This is the Chamber of Secrets," I said, knowing I had to speak up. "Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets." Before he could react, I put on a serious face and lied smoothly. "Recently, I kept hearing something calling me in Parseltongue, so I came here." The truth was, I had discovered the entrance days ago. I had been exploring, trying passwords, finding exits, but no basilisk yet. "Follow me." I gritted my teeth and turned to walk into the tunnel. To prevent himself from discovering the existence of the real basilisk and stealing my kill, I could only painfully make a sacrifice. We soon saw the gigantic snakeskin in the tunnel. It shed glittering green scales under the wandlight. Snape's expression changed instantly. "There seems to have been a large snake here before, which left this behind," I said quickly. "But I've explored here for a long time and found nothing else, only a few exits." He was staring blankly at the snakeskin. His black eyes shone brightly with greed. He was assessing it. "He's thinking exactly what I was thinking 2 days ago," I thought with heartache. "He's studying how to harvest it for potions." "Where are the exits?" he asked in a low voice, eyes still glued to the prize. "Ahead. One leads to the Forbidden Forest, one leads to the mountains behind the Black Lake." "Professor Snape," I called out. He was surprised by my compromising tone. "Do you plan to take all of this?" I asked, gesturing to the skin. "Or take only a part at a time?" "What do you want to do?" he frowned. "I mean, Professor, you also know my potion-making level. Could you leave a part for me?" "Whose line is that supposed to be?" He became furious. "Do you think I'll believe that this snakeskin was originally this tattered? But I discovered it, so it should be mine to deal with. There's still so much snakeskin left, it's unfair if you take it all. Does Mr. Potter think the punishment of being expelled tomorrow morning is fair?" He smirked, unwilling to yield an inch. "Fine," I glared angrily at him. But secretly, I rejoiced. "Take the dried skin, you fool," I thought. "As long as I hide the real basilisk from you, the fresh ingredients will be mine." "We'll come back tomorrow night to collect the materials," he concluded. I led him further ahead. After opening another door with Parseltongue, we arrived in the main chamber. It was a spacious stone hall. Carved on the wall was the statue of Salazar Slytherin, a lifelike giant serpent, its mouth wide open, revealing a dark hole. I swept my gaze blandly over the snake's mouth and pointed ahead. "The exit is over there." I had opened this mouth last night, but nothing had come out. I had planned to crawl in tonight, but now I just hope he wouldn't notice. "Wait." He stopped me. His gaze lingered suspiciously on the statue's mouth. "What is this?" "That is..." Before I could get the words out, a tremendous noise rang out. The stone floor vibrated beneath our feet. Grinding stone, hissing. "Something is coming out," Snape said in a deep voice. As he spoke, he raised his wand and stepped forward, shielding me behind him. His expression was grave. His eyes were fixed tightly on the wide-open hole of the snake's mouth. Connecting it with that gigantic snakeskin just now, he knew. I thought of the same thing. My expression changed suddenly. The King of Serpents. I lunged forward abruptly, thinking of only one sentence in the emergency. "Severus, close your eyes!"
The instant I tackled him to the ground, I didn't think. I just reacted. My body, trained by 2 wars, knew what to do before my brain could catch up. I fully utilized my newfound agility, wrapping my arm around his waist, an action that felt bizarrely intimate and necessary. I rolled forward with the momentum. I dodged the unseen strike based purely on the rush of wind displacement. Thud. We hit the stone floor. I released him instantly and pushed him backward without delay, signaling for him to hide first. "It's a basilisk," I said quickly and calmly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "You must not open your eyes, or you'll die." "Direct spell attacks probably won't work either," he added gravely, his voice coming from somewhere near my shoulder. Judging from the skin sig just now, its skin strength should be on par with Dragonhide. Rashly launching an attack might result in the spell being reflected back, causing instant death. He emphasized this sentence as a warning to me. He feared Harry might impulsively do something irrational like trying to stun a 1,000-year-old killing machine. "Do you think I'm one of those brainless Gryffindors?" I scoffed coldly. My mind was already racing, searching for ways to deal with the beast. If my guess was correct, for 2 wizards capable only of standard spell work to face this basilisk, the outcome would be disastrous. We had to outsmart it. Snape was silent for a moment. I sensed him tilting his face slightly in my direction with a peculiar expression, seeming to want to say something about my tone. But feeling the timing was wrong, he immediately turned his attention back to the threat. I closed my eyes tight. I didn't need sight. I needed authority. Unleashing my past aura, the aura of the head of Slytherin, the aura of a man who had stared down the Dark Lord, I hissed gloomily into the darkness. "Stop!"
The sound of grinding scales on stone halted abruptly. The giant basilisk paused its attack. "Parcel tongue?" it hissed back. The voice was raspy, loud, and ancient. It vibrated in my chest. "Yes, stop attacking. We only intruded by mistake. Only the hair of Slytherin can command me. Not every parcel mouth is the hair." The basilisk's voice became terrifying, dripping with malice. "Besides, the hair has already given me orders to eliminate all impure bloodlines I see." Although Snape couldn't understand the hissing, he sensed the shift in the air. The aura around the basilisk became more dangerous. I felt a hand grip my wrist firmly from behind. His hand was cold, but the grip was protective. He was positioning himself to pull me back, to shield the brat if a fight broke out. "Impure bloodlines? That doesn't apply to us," I said calmly. "The person beside me is the head of Slytherin House, and I am a Parselmouth. Even if you don't obey my commands, there is no need to attack us." The basilisk fell silent for a moment, processing the logic. "You are right." He heard the heavy sound of a massive body lowering to the floor. The aggression dissipated. I pursed my lips, seizing on a key piece of information. "You said the hair gave you orders. When was that? Who is he?" I twisted my wrist uncomfortably in Snape's firm grip, but didn't break free. I understood the extent to which he had protected Potter in the previous life. Since this small action could make himself feel a bit more at ease, I let it be. "Before I went to sleep," the basilisk thought for a moment and said slowly, "The hair is the hair. He has the blood of Slytherin." "Blood of Slytherin," I repeated in a low voice. I had a general impression of the incident in Potter's second year. Ginny Weasley, the diary, the petrification. In the end, it was never revealed to the public who the true heir was. Or perhaps Albus had deliberately concealed the truth. In my mind, there was only one person with Slytherin blood, and apart from myself, only one other Parselmouth. The hair was undoubtedly Voldemort. "Can you leave this place?" I asked. "Aside from the feeding passage, I cannot use any other exits." The basilisk shook his head, a hint of dissatisfaction in his voice. "The hair said to hide for a while because I eliminated an impure bloodline in the castle." "Myrtle," I realized. "I understand. We'll come see you next time." I thoughtfully tugged at Snape's robes, signaling for us to leave. The basilisk hissed, lying in place and watching us retreat with blind eyes. We walked a long way along the exit tunnel without looking back. Neither of us was in the mood to think about the skin sink or even the potion materials on the basilisk. I translated what the basilisk had said for him. "Professor Snape, what the basilisk said is very strange. There have been no rumors of anyone being attacked in the castle recently." I put a trace of confusion on my face. Snape, as expected, picked up the thread immediately. Basilisks have a very long lifespan. Since it was hiding in the chamber to lie down, it means the killing might have happened many years ago. But who could the hair of Slytherin be? A Parselmouth who also has Slytherin blood. I continued to probe. Snape's face grew even darker. After a long silence, he finally squeezed a sentence out through his teeth dryly. "That is not something you should know." I stopped talking. The information revealed was enough for himself to be vigilant and go have a talk with Albus. The sky began to lighten from deep black blue to a bruised purple, indicating the night was almost over. The Forbidden Forest at this time looked eerie, but having frequented it often in my past life, both as a student and a spy, I felt nothing but familiarity. Snape walked in silence beside me. I knew he was running through various thoughts. He glanced at me. Due to my height, I stumbled a bit over a root, but my expression showed none of the fear typical of a child. Truly hard to say whether he was occasionally bolder than his peers or inherited the Potter family's reckless arrogance, he was probably thinking. But the disgust in his eyes had faded. He realized that my rampant night wandering had a cause, the Parseltongue whispers. I wasn't just breaking rules for fun. I was investigating. Suddenly, his upper lip curled into a sneer. He turned at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "By the way, Potter, can you explain that form of address you shouted just now?" My body stiffened. I turned somewhat rigidly to look at him. "I do not recall when you gained the right to call me by my given name," he said softly, his voice like silk over a razor blade. His black eyes stared coldly and threateningly at me. "Severus, close your eyes." I had shouted it in the heat of the moment. "It's obvious, Professor Snape." I looked panicked for a split second, then immediately calmed, letting out a light, somewhat mocking scoff to cover my tracks. Just a slip of the tongue in a moment of urgency. After all, Severus is much faster to say than Professor Snape, especially in that situation. I used a tone implying defiance and displeasure. Usually if Potter dared to offend me like this, I would have flown into a rage and deducted 50 points. But at this moment, he only gave me a meaningful look and fell silent. My face tightened unhappily. I observed his expression frequently. Why isn't he deducting points? I was full of suspicion now. I wanted to trick him into deducting points to restore the balance. Was my tone not provocative enough? "You do not need to hide anything." He seemed to have made up his mind. His mouth twitched as he said this. But what did I hide? I moved the corner of my mouth, embarrassed to show my confusion too obviously. Since I was the one who insisted on using Veritase's Serum before, the consequences are naturally mine to bear. He seemed to have great difficulty speaking. He paused, a reddish blood suddenly appearing on his pale face. "I am not clear on matters of the future, but addressing me according to your habit is your right." My habit? I almost stuttered. My eyes widened as I stared at myself in horror.
He thinks in the future we were on a first-name basis because of the relationship. No, you misunderstood. I tried hard to explain to him in a calm tone, desperation leaking into my voice. That was really a slip of the tongue. Our relationship really isn't that close. A Potter calling Snape by his given name as a habit? I absolutely could not let himself misunderstand this.
"Suit yourself." His voice turned cold. He flicked his robes, a gesture I knew intimately, and strode forward, no longer accommodating my shorter, younger stride. I was stunned for a moment. Then, cursing internally, I sped up to chase after myself. I strode through the rugged, root-strewn jungle floor, my deep and shallow steps struggling to match his pace. When I finally caught up with the familiar black figure, I had to take a moment to catch my breath. I looked up. His lips were tightly pursed, his face was tense, his profile carved from cold, stern marble. He was still striding forward, looking straight ahead, but I noticed something. After I caught up, he slowed his pace slightly. He was no longer walking with that aggressive posture wrapped in a murderous aura. We walked side by side. This appearance, was he angry? It didn't look like it. But if he wasn't angry, then why did he suddenly speed up just now and not wait for me? I frowned slightly, scrutinizing his expression carefully but discreetly from the corner of my eye. I found nothing. His occlemency walls were up. "Assuming there is nothing wrong with your eyes, do not keep peeking at me from the corner of your eye like a fool," he suddenly said, irritably. He turned his head aggressively to look at me, his eyes gloomy and disdainful. "Sorry, Professor Snape," I apologized dryly, forcing my expression to look awkward and embarrassed. I immediately turned my head back, resumed a nonchalant expression, and focused on walking. However, inside, I was extremely astonished. Generally speaking, when I observed others, I had my own technique. First, making my gaze flat and casual, using magic to weaken my presence. I never looked directly at the subject, only observing from the periphery. This way, the person being observed generally wouldn't notice. Even someone as keen as him, as me, shouldn't have felt it if I was doing it correctly. I hadn't expected it would be such a coincidence that he was also keeping an eye on me at all times. The sense of crisis in my heart became urgent. His attitude toward me was too wrong. I felt it necessary to clear up the previous misunderstanding immediately. Because of the Veritaserum, did he think we would be friends in the future? He actually allowed a Potter to call him by his given name. Leaving aside that I couldn't tolerate the existence of such a gross misunderstanding, if allowed to continue, my master plan to provoke him to deduct points would be ruined. I needed his hatred, not his tolerance. "Professor Snape," I took a deep breath, calculating how to start explaining.
After all, he had used Veritaserum on me. Everyone knows Veritaserum wouldn't let people tell lies. I had to weave the truth into a narrative he would accept. "Actually, you have misunderstood some things," I said tactfully. "In the future, our relationship is actually not as harmonious as you imagine." I searched my brain before barely finding the word harmonious to represent the absolute disaster that was our relationship. The look he gave me was inexplicably strange. He twitched the corner of his mouth before uttering a syllable calmly through his teeth. "And? You just looked after me in secret because of Professor Dumbledore all along, and we just happened to die in front of Nagini at the same time," I said with a composed face, my expression very sincere. "In fact, you did so much, but I always treated you disrespectfully and said very terrible things. Our relationship was very bad." I narrated according to how I and the original Potter had interacted in my previous life. It wasn't hard to recall the bitterness. "So, we aren't friends, and I have no right to call you by your given name. I must say this now also because I want to apologize for my recklessness and stupidity." I thought to myself that if the real little Potter ever said this, the world might actually end, but that would never be possible. Now let me say these words to myself on Potter's behalf. A posthumous apology from a ghost to a ghost. I lowered my eyelids, seeming guilty and self-reproachful, but my inner expression was resolute. "Is that so?" He raised an eyebrow. He paused for a moment, his black eyes drilling into me. "Then were those words of yours recently also born of your apology and wanting to make it up to me?" I froze for a moment. He was trying to find a logical reason for my recent flirting and compliments. I reacted immediately, answering affirmatively. "That's right. I hadn't expected he would find an excuse for me. Excellent. If he thought I was just sucking up to apologize, he would realize how pathetic I was. If he could be angrier because of this explanation, that would be even better." He narrowed his eyes, looking coldly at little Potter, who was waiting with his head bowed before him. My expression was sincere and serious, with no sign of lying. My words also lightly explained the content of the Veritaserum incident, fitting the facts perfectly. "I understand." He nodded with a tensed face, his eyes slowly turning cold. Relief washed over me. The look he gave me now was as distant and unfamiliar as the look he gave so many dunderheads in his class. The walls were back up, the hatred was restored. I looked back at him, paused, and withdrew my gaze as if hiding guilt, continuing on my way with concentration. There was no expression on my face, but inside I was cheering. He pursed his lips non-committally and looked ahead. The sky was getting lighter. Dawn was approaching, painting the horizon in bruised purples and grays. I could see the edge of the forbidden forest not far ahead and the outline of the castle in the distance. Between the two of us walking side by side, the atmosphere dropped back to freezing point. It was perfect. After a while, we finally reached the boundary line between the forbidden forest and the Hogwarts grounds. He stopped. He glanced at me and gave a final warning in a cold voice. "If you are not yet confused to the point of delirium, you had better forget everything about tonight after you go back. Do not let me find you approaching that place again. Now, go back to the castle by yourself." "I understand, Professor Snape," I agreed immediately. I didn't hesitate. I even allowed myself to look relieved, which wasn't hard, and ran quickly towards the castle, as if fleeing a nightmare. I didn't look back. If I had, I might have seen him standing where he was, watching me run away. I might have seen that while his gaze was gloomy, the expression on his face slowly softened in a way that contradicted my entire plan. I ran, confident that I had successfully deceived him. I was sure he had accepted my excuse that we were enemies, not friends. I completely forgot one variable: the mirror of Eris. If he hadn't seen the reflection that night, the reflection of us living together in peace, he might have believed my excuses. But as I sprinted towards the warmth of the castle, congratulating myself on a job well done, I was blissfully unaware that the man standing at the forest edge believed the exact opposite of what I intended. He didn't think I was clarifying the truth. He thought I was distancing myself, trying to cover up that I liked him with clumsy lies to protect his dignity.
As I disappeared into the castle, Snape stood there, not angry, but suspicious. Why, he was likely wondering, is Potter trying so hard to hide his feelings? Was it related to the basilisk tonight, or is he just protecting me? I had dug my grave, and I was currently running headfirst into it.
I returned alone to the Gryffindor dormitory in the early morning, moving like a ghost. I glanced cautiously at the lumps in the other beds. The curtains were tightly drawn, and the rhythmic sounds of breathing and Weasley's porcine snoring rose and fell, indicating the Dunderheads were sound asleep. The light in the curtained room was very dim, creating a peaceful, seductive drowsiness. Especially when one suddenly returns to a warm, soft bed after a thrilling all-nighter, this drowsiness is amplified tenfold. I blinked my dry eyes and lay down on the bed. However, I didn't fall asleep immediately. I raised my occlumency shields, turning my mind into a cold, hard stone to suppress the exhaustion. I couldn't sleep just yet. I stared calmly at the gaudy gold and red hangings above my bed, calculating furiously. My former self's misunderstanding of Potter truly left me with lingering anxiety. I wondered if the clumsy explanations I gave him in the Forbidden Forest had actually dispelled that absurd notion of goodwill. To be safe, I decided to lay low for a while. I would avoid using that affectionate excuse to provoke him into deducting points. It was becoming too dangerous. However, there was a pressing issue. Once the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets was discovered, Snape would undoubtedly tell Dumbledore. They would find a time to go deal with this big trouble. I had to hurry. I had to go to the chamber one more time before the basilisk was officially killed and harvested by the school. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to keep those fresh, priceless ingredients for myself. Tonight would be the time. When everything was settled and he couldn't catch me red-handed, there would be no problems. I would have my stash, and he would have the glory. I went over tonight's plan in my mind again. Nothing had been missed. Satisfied, I relaxed slightly, closed my eyes, and finally allowed this weak body to sleep. ... Potter, stop! A cold, familiar voice rang out abruptly in the darkness. In the stone antechamber of the Chamber of Secrets, my movement froze. I turned my head. Hesitantly, I watched a black figure billowing in with large, furious strides. Very good, Potter, if that pitiful brain capacity of yours hasn't forgotten the warning I gave you just this morning. His gloomy face was filled with rage as he stepped forward, grabbed my wrist in a vice-like grip, his mouth opening to roar a terrible lecture. But his voice stopped abruptly. His gaze swept over my tattered, dust-covered robes. It lingered on the large, dark blood stain on the front. It moved to the bulging dragonhide bag on my back. Finally, his gaze rested on the massive, green-scaled corpse of the basilisk lying silent and motionless in the center of the huge room. I saw the color drain from his face instantly. He turned ashen. He tightened his grip on my wrist, his voice suddenly dropping to a barely audible whisper. "You dared to face this basilisk alone?" He exuded a pervasive chill. His cold black eyes were terrifying when fixed on someone like this. I realized with a start that I had no idea my expression used to be this scary when I was truly angry in the past. It was effective. I had no choice but to purse my lips and say nothing, wearing the expression of a student ready to accept punishment. "Answer me, Mr. Potter."
He gripped my wrist until I felt the bones grinding. His voice was still light and low, gentle, yet carrying an impossible-to-ignore danger. Do you think that just because you have experienced it once, you are capable enough to deal with this basilisk alone as a first year? He sneered dangerously, his face inches from mine. Do you think your little life won't be lost no matter how much you toss it around? As long as you are bitten by the basilisk once, I guarantee you will be crunched into pieces like a thin biscuit. There won't even be bones left. The boy who lived would die silently in this chamber, unknown to anyone. What a desirable ending. Potter, is that what you think? He stared sharply at the bloodstain on the front of my robes, his eyes burning with a mix of fury and terror. Of course not. I squeezed the sentence out dryly. I paused, realizing I needed to de-escalate this before he dragged me to the hospital wing. This blood isn't mine. I'm not injured. It was inevitably splattered on me when I was harvesting the venom sacs and skin. I hadn't had time to scourgify it yet. He raised an eyebrow. As expected, his mind shifted from panic to suspicion instantly. Then could Mr. Potter tell me, he asked with feigned confusion, what do you plan to do with so many potion ingredients taken from the Basilisk, ingredients which students are strictly forbidden to keep or use? My eyes looked helpless for a moment, a calculated act. I lowered my voice. I use them to brew potions. After all, in the future, I am also a potions master. Although I said this boldly, I was mentally prepared. I probably wouldn't be able to keep the majority of the Basilisk Hall. He was too greedy for ingredients. I knew that because I was too greedy for ingredients. Potions master? He narrowed his eyes suspiciously, his expression non-committal. His expression turned cold. Still unceremoniously gripping my wrist, he turned to walk out, dragging me along. Regardless of what you are in the future, it is necessary for us to go see Albus now. His voice was laced with mockery and schadenfreude, as if he couldn't wait to see me in trouble. What we need to discuss now is whether a first-year student who has violated multiple school rules should be expelled and sent home tomorrow morning. I dug my heels in. Professor Snape, you killed the basilisk tonight. He stopped. I only hope to take away one bag of materials. The rest of the shed skin and this entire basilisk carcass will be your spoils of war. I knew I definitely wouldn't be expelled. Dumbledore wouldn't allow it, but Snape would definitely want to swallow all the ingredients for his private stores. I could only settle for the second best option, giving the bulk to him and keeping only the prime cuts in my backpack. After all, I had nothing on hand right now except for a cheap pewter cauldron I'd bought this year. Even if I wanted to use the ingredients to brew complex potions, my will exceeded my capacity. This bag was enough for my current needs. His expression shifted. He paused, looking from the dead snake to the bag on my back. Then he turned back to me, his eyes widening slightly, as if a sudden realization had struck him. After Halloween, were you the one who brewed the wound cleansing potion and Murtlap essence and left them in my potions office?
I froze, deliberately letting a hint of hesitation bleed into my expression. But he, my former self, had already deduced the answer from my attitude. "How did you get the password to my office?" he asked, narrowing his eyes dangerously. "Or did that Medusa portrait let you in without permission?" "No," I quickly replied. I couldn't let him blame the portrait. She had guarded that door for me faithfully for decades. I didn't want her removed or scrubbed because of my current transgressions. The passwords you change are basically all potion ingredients. I simply memorized the entire encyclopedia of potion ingredients.
Memorized. He paused. He actually memorized the whole thing. I saw his cheek twitch. I knew that micro-expression. He was trying hard to suppress a look of admiration. A first year memorizing the entire encyclopedia was a feat worthy of a young Severus Snape. He nodded coldly and finally said flatly, "My office is not a place you can enter and leave as you please. I hope you can keep this firmly in mind." Suddenly, he took a step forward, looming over me imperiously. His hooked nose almost bumped into my face again. He whispered oppressively, invading my personal space to instill fear. "Understood, Potter?" I suppressed the urge to back away. I stared motionless at his lips, which were uncomfortably close. "I understand," I said cautiously. He had to be careful or we would actually touch. At that moment, he seemed to notice the direction of my gaze. He noticed the proximity. He straightened up abruptly, as if scalded, putting distance between us. To cover his flustered reaction, he reached out and grabbed the strap of the dragonhide bag on my back. "These ingredients are also confiscated," he said, his voice mean and stern. "Even if you have the memories of a future potions master, thinking you can control your magic with a first-year body is too fantastical." Idiot, I thought. What on earth goes through his head all day? Does he think I'm fantasizing about him? He tried to take the backpack, but felt resistance. I gripped the other end of the strap tightly. My voice became dry, desperate. "You are also a potions master," I pleaded, appealing to the one thing we shared unequivocally. "You should understand how painful it is to look at precious ingredients but not be able to use them." His pull paused. He met my emerald green eyes. This time, I didn't lower my head quickly like I usually did during training. I gazed at him persistently, letting him see the obsession of a craftsman. He couldn't help but look away first. He relinquished his grip on the strap. "You can do what you want to do," he agreed reluctantly. "But one thing, when doing those experiments, you must stay in my office and proceed under my supervision." He sneered, needing to justify his leniency. "I don't want to be inexplicably charged with the crime of tacitly allowing a student to conduct illegal experiments resulting in death later on." Deal, I thought, though I kept my face neutral. He let go of the backpack, turning to walk towards the huge body of the basilisk to assess what materials to take for himself. I slung the backpack back onto my shoulder, my expression softening slightly. Thankfully, this bag was saved. Until things take a turn for the worse either. The next day, true to his nature, Snape reported to Dumbledore that he had killed the basilisk. Then he immediately turned around and deducted 50 points from Gryffindor because of someone who had been night wandering for a week. The Gryffindors, passing through the Great Hall for breakfast, were already numb. They had come to understand a fundamental truth. As long as Harry Potter was around, their points would always be at the bottom of the hourglass. Although they no longer isolated me, basically not many people were willing to actively approach me. It was still only Weasley and Granger who accompanied me, nervously comforting me, telling me not to be sad about the situation. Sad? Of course I wasn't sad. I was incredibly happy inside. Although I had cautiously kept my distance from him recently and refrained from teasing him, he still deducted points from me at the slightest provocation. This made me sigh with relief. It meant he finally no longer had that stupid idea of being gentle towards me. The natural order of things had been restored. He hated Potter, and Potter was miserable. Perfect. Now, it was approaching the end of the term. The holidays were coming soon. At that time, even though I had to go back to Petunia's house to live, a thought that made my stomach turn, I realized I could still use these basilisk materials to conduct experiments. After all, Snape couldn't supervise me during the holidays, and brewing potions didn't fall under the scope of casting spells, so it wasn't regulated by the Ministry of Magic's trace. Only, I narrowed my eyes, staring at my plate. I had to think of a way to prevent Petunia and her whale of a husband from disturbing my potion making. The thin, timid appearance of the original Harry Potter when he first started school was still fresh in my memory. They had starved him, locked him in a cupboard, treated him like vermin. Not this time, I thought, coldly. Time passed, and in what seemed like a blink of an eye, the end of May arrived.
The luggage in the student dormitories seemed to be cleared out in an instant, stripped bare like a carcass picked clean. The platform was crowded with students who had shed their robes and changed into muggle clothes, buzzing with the chaotic energy of release. I stood in the throng, a small island of misery. I was wearing a spacious, vomit-colored brown shirt that hung off my frame like a tent. At my feet sat a huge trunk. I waited in the crowd for the arrival of the Hogwarts Express, feeling exposed. I tugged awkwardly at the empty dangling sleeves. A flash of pure disgust passed through my eyes, and I quickly lowered my head. Obviously, none of Harry Potter's muggle clothes were his own. These were Dudley Dursley's cast-offs, vast and shapeless, which was why they were so ill-fitting. They attracted surprised, pitying looks from many students nearby. All of this made me uncontrollably recall my own terrible childhood at Spinner's End. I, too, had forever worn ill-fitting, ridiculous clothes. My mother's old blouses, my father's worn coats. I had spent my youth hiding my inferiority behind the strange looks of others, always wearing a caustic and gloomy demeanor as a shield. To think that the boy who lived, the golden boy of Gryffindor, shared this same sordid humiliation, it was a bitter irony. My gaze swept behind me, searching the dense crowd. I scanned the faces, looking for that familiar black figure, but I failed to find him. Of course, I scolded myself. That made sense. He, my former self, never took the train home in previous years, nor would he ever demean himself by coming to the platform to see anyone off. How could I possibly expect to find him here? My expression didn't change. I kept my head down to continue hiding the look on my face. Although I had been Harry Potter for a year now, without the greasy curtains of hair on both sides of my cheeks to cover my eyes and expression, I was still unaccustomed to the exposure. I felt naked without my shields. "The train is coming!" someone cheered. The students stirred like a flock of startled birds. It's coming! It's coming! We're going home!" They began to move forward, standing on tiptoe and craning their necks. The brownish-red train approached from the distance, a long plume of white smoke trailing above the engine. It made a rhythmic clattering sound, slowly grinding to a halt. It was time to board. I was squeezed forward, surrounded by students who all looked impatient to leave. I glanced back at the castle one last time, unsure why I did so, perhaps a lingering reluctance to return to the Dursleys, then boarded the train, dragging my heavy luggage behind me. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't the only one watching. Below the crowded platform, hiding behind the thick trunk of a large tree not far away, a black-robed figure finally stepped out from the shadows. Severus Snape gazed indifferently at one of the train windows. It was a very difficult task to find a specific person in such a huge, chaotic crowd. However, the Snape of the past loathed the Elder Potter imperably, so much so that he could accurately identify him just by seeing a single tuft of that messy hair. Now, standing in the shadows, he was somewhat glad he possessed this skill. He only had to spot that familiar messy black back of the head to find Little Potter. He saw me. He saw Little Potter wearing ridiculous, ballooning clothes, lowering his head in obvious inferiority within the crowd. His expression was hidden, but his posture screamed of shame. Snape's gaze darkened slightly. He had specifically set aside a week of precious time to correct Little Potter's demeanor, to make him stand tall and confident. Now, seeing those rags, he wondered if it had all been useless effort. A vague, unfamiliar anger rose in his heart. Harry Potter had always lived with his aunt. That was the home of Petunia Evans. Combining the boy's malnourished appearance with these atrocious clothes, one didn't need to be a legilimens to imagine what kind of life Harry Potter had lived before Hogwarts. Snape turned to leave with a gloomy expression, his turning robes carving a sharp arc behind him. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him. That bag of Basilisk ingredients. It seemed to still be in Little Potter's hands. He couldn't monitor the boy during the summer vacation, and the idea of those precious materials being wasted or discovered by muggles was intolerable. It seemed that he would have to find a time to retrieve them,
and perhaps see exactly what Petunia Evans was up to. Snape narrowed his eyes. He glanced back one more time at the slowly moving Hogwarts Express, then vanished into the shadows.
After traveling for what felt like an eternity of mindless chatter, the Hogwarts Express finally ground to a halt. Students crossed the platform in 2s and 3s, heading towards the barrier to the Muggle world. To avoid detection by the Muggles, the guard controlled the flow, letting us exit in batches. The pace was excruciatingly slow. I planned to wait a while before leaving. After all, the snowy white owl perched on the trunk beside me was quite conspicuous. She wasn't locked in a cage, a detail I had overlooked. Her pure white feathers were puffed up in indignation, and her large amber eyes were glaring at me with resentment, emitting angry clicking sounds. In fact, I hadn't realized I had an owl for the entire year. Not until this feathered menace couldn't bear the neglect anymore and flew into the Great Hall during breakfast, landing on my head and pecking me angrily. It was only through the name Weasley and Granger used for her that I knew this creature was called Hedwig. For decades prior, Severus Snape practically had no one to write to, so I always used the school owls for official business. Now that I suddenly had a pet of my own, I was somewhat unaccustomed to the maintenance required. It was the same this time coming back. I hadn't realized at all that I had to bring the owl home. It wasn't until the train was about to depart and Hedwig, having waited in vain at the owlery, rushed to the Hogsmeade platform, flew in through the window and grabbed my ear. I touched my ear, which was still tender and reddened from the picking. I wasn't angry. I just reached out somewhat awkwardly and rubbed her feathers in a gesture of comfort. After all, this was technically my owl now. "Harry, it's our turn, let's go." Weasley patted me on the shoulder. His parents and sister were wizards, so they could come onto the platform. Granger's Muggle parents and the Dursleys were waiting on the other side. I pushed my heavy trunk through the barrier of platform 9 3/4. Behind me, I heard Granger shout, "Mom!" and rush off. Standing beside his family, Weasley waved to me. "Mate, remember to keep in touch during the summer holidays. I'll call you on the Fellytone." Better to just write letters, I said dryly. The idea of Weasley attempting to use a telephone was a headache I didn't need. King's Cross Station was bustling with people. Everywhere were reunited students and parents. I stood still, looking around, trying to find a woman who looked like Petunia Evans. But there was no solitary woman on the platform waiting for me. Speaking of solitary, there was only a fierce-looking man whose horizontal growth nearly rivaled Hagrid's and whose face was an unnaturally purple shade of plum. My gaze met the man's for a few seconds. Suddenly, the excessively fat man stormed over furiously and roared, "Boy, what are you dawdling for? Leaving me standing here like a fool for so long?" My face instantly went wooden. This was the husband Petunia Evans chose. The man's originally furious expression paused when he saw the owl. His volume dropped an octave, shifting from rage to fear as he hissed hatefully, "Get in the car quickly and bring that damn thing with you." I tuned out his roar directly. My expression unchanging, I followed him back to a car, then clumsily heaved my trunk into the boot. He didn't offer to help. Although his attitude towards Harry Potter is terrible, I assessed silently, at least he was willing to drive to London to pick him up. My initial impression of this family changed slightly. When I was young, I always traveled alone to and from school. Even though my mother was a witch, when I was 11, I was taken to Diagon Alley by a Hogwarts professor, not her. That woman called Mom, perhaps the most fitting title for her was Tobias Snape's wife. She cried for that man, worked hard for that man, and worried all day for that man. Only on a rare occasion would she remember she was also a mother to a child. She never went to the platform to pick me up because she was afraid that man would be angry if dinner wasn't ready. I reined in my thoughts expressionless as I watched the car drive into his sterile, identical neighborhood. The street sign read Privet Drive. "Get out!" the man ordered gruffly. The car stopped in front of number 4. The front door opened quickly. A thin woman with a horse-like face walked out. "Vernon." She didn't glance at me at all, as if I was something detestable stuck to his shoe. "You're back. Just in time for lunch.
Dudley's back from Smeltings for the holidays too. I looked woodenly at the person in front of me. Even though my last meeting with Petunia Evans was decades ago, I couldn't connect this mean-looking woman with the long neck to the delicate little girl who was always frowning in my memories. The girl who wanted magic but was denied it. "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and get in. Don't you dare let anyone see these weird things." Once the man named Vernon had entered the house, Aunt Petunia hurriedly looked around cautiously and scolded me in a whisper. Before I figured out the power dynamic, I wasn't prepared to act rashly. I lifted the trunk up the steps with some difficulty and pushed it in. Noises from a television drifted from the clean and clinically tidy living room. A bulky boy with a face full of flesh, clearly their biological son, was sprawled on the sofa staring at the screen. Seeing someone enter, he merely called out unceremoniously, "Dad?" His gaze swept over me, ignoring me as well. "Hurry up and take your luggage upstairs, then come down and watch the pot." Petunia urged again. "Come down after you've unpacked, and don't let me see a single weird thing outside your room." I gazed across the entire living room. I didn't miss a single detail. The abundance of photos of the fat boy, the complete absence of any photo of the boy currently standing in the hallway. I roughly understood the situation. Then I carried the trunk and Hedwig upstairs. The second floor was full of bedrooms. One was obviously for the couple. One was filled with all sorts of high-end toys and dazzling objects. It should be their sons. There was a guest room. Then there was no suspense about the answer. The last small bedroom was Harry Potter's. After walking in, I placed the trunk on the floor. I had to suppress the urge to use a cleaning charm immediately. I looked around. This dim little room had a completely different style from the rest of the house. Dust was everywhere. Who knows how long it had been since it was cleaned? The desk nearby was piled with broken toy air guns, broken cameras, and other refuse. It looked simply like a storage room for broken things. Only a low, small bed by the window with a thin quilt folded on it barely indicated that a human was expected to live here. Hedwig flew up, hooting in displeasure at the squalor, and finally landed on my shoulder. "Wait in the room for now. I'll be back in a while." I put Hedwig back on the trunk. My expression turned cold and solemn, and I smoothed out the oversized brown shirt I was wearing and turned to go downstairs. I didn't intend to help Petunia with the housework as she had just commanded. In my view, scrubbing floors was a waste of a wizard's time. But I could also not bring myself to live in someone else's house with peace of mind without paying any price. I wasn't a charity case. I decided to have a talk with this family. Once my potions were exchanged for Muggle banknotes, that would presumably add some persuasiveness to my negotiation. Money, I recalled, was a language Muggles like Vernon Dursley understood perfectly.
In the early evening, as the sky began to darken, the lights in every household on Privet Drive shone brightly. The enticing aroma of roast beef and gravy wafted from the kitchens of the perfectly normal houses. I walked slowly down the stairs, heading straight through the living room toward the front door. The television was blasting loudly, accompanied by the uproarious pig-like laughter of that stupid, bulky boy, Dudley. "Where are you going? It's almost time for dinner, and you're not coming over to watch the pot?" Petunia glanced keenly out from the kitchen, staring unhappily at me. "I have something to do," I said indifferently, not breaking stride. "Don't mind me." I walked to the door and bent down in a hallway to put on my shoes. As I moved, the hem of my oversized shirt rode up, and the neck of a slender glass bottle clinked softly in my pocket. Vernon, who was reading a newspaper in the living room, turned his head. He exchanged a suspicious glance with Petunia and stood up. His massive body blocked my path like a small mountain of suet. "Boy," he frowned and threatened gruffly, "don't think just because you went and learned some weird stuff that you can act tough. You better throw those damned things away and behave yourself." "I said I have something to do," I interrupted in a sinister tone. I raised my head, though the expression on my face remained calm. "If there's nothing wrong with your ears and you don't need me to repeat myself, I'll be back before bedtime. Don't wait up for me for dinner."
I only had the finished potions on me right now. I hadn't exchanged them for muggle money yet, so wasting breath on this family was inefficient. I didn't intend to explain further. You! It was the first time Petunia had been talked back to like this by Harry. She was both shocked and angry. Where are you going? But those emerald green eyes, identical to her sister's, stared at her gloomily. The atmosphere became inexplicably terrifying, causing all of Petunia's subsequent scolding to choke in her throat. I frowned impatiently, turned away, and reached for the door handle. Boy, come back! Vernon roared in anger. I ignored him completely. His face turned purple in an instant. He probably hadn't been ignored like this in a long time. If you're thinking of going out to show off those ridiculous tricks of yours, turning frog spawn into rabbits, or running wild outside with that bunch of equally weird friends of yours, I'm warning you, I absolutely will not allow you to step out of this door. Vernon rushed over with agility that belied his size. He slammed the door shut with a bang, trapping me inside. You ungrateful little brat. We took you in for so many years, and all you do is cause trouble all day long. Even a stick can't beat those things out of you. You're rotten to the core. If I hear even a whisper of strange rumors from the neighbors tomorrow, you'll spend this summer vacation back in your cupboard under the stairs and never come out. Cupboard. I glanced thoughtfully at the small door under the stairs. My gaze grew colder than winter at Hogwarts. Vernon, panting, tipped his head back and gulped down several mouthfuls of brandy, spilling it onto his mustache. He continued to glare at me as if facing a great enemy. He intended to guard the door. The sound of the TV in the living room inexplicably lowered. Dudley watched from the sofa, glancing at my face with schadenfreude and triumph. Finished? I waited a moment before asking expressionlessly, raising one eyebrow. My face was calm, my eyes staring heavily at them. There was not a trace of overt aggression in my body, yet a bone-deep chill rose in the room. I'm in warning you, no matter what you want, stay in your room and behave. Don't get any funny ideas. Petunia, half hiding beside Vernon, whispered sharply, You are just like your mother. The atmosphere solidified. My expression froze. Lily. I looked past Petunia, fixing my gloomy gaze on Vernon. I hissed coldly, ignoring the insult. I suggest you'd better move aside if you still want to receive a sum for child support. Child... what? Support? Child support. I twitched the corner of my mouth in a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Although for the past 11 years, I could entirely demand wages from you based on child labor standards. But for future convenience, I have decided to pay you a sum. Consider it rent for living here so long. 11 years, calculated at the standard market price for a hotel. Any objections? I swept a half smile over them, drawling sarcastically. Many thanks for the comfortable life you've given me. Seeing so many ugly scars on this body while showering, I could guess the nature of that comfort. Their expressions became unnatural. Don't try to trick us. How could you have that much money? Vernon asked gruffly. Besides, the banks are closed by now. How pitiful. I sneered contemptuously. Your ignorance makes my face burn with shame. I dropped the sneer, stepped over his legs, walked straight past him, and turned the door handle. This time Vernon didn't stop me. He stared wide-eyed, paralyzed by greed and confusion. Wizard banks are open all day, I added kindly over my shoulder. And if you used that already large head of yours to think properly, you should understand that school teaches me skills, not just how to pack on fat like your precious son. Dudley's laughter stopped abruptly. Is the concept of learning a skill or two to make money difficult for your intellects to grasp? I tilted my head lazily. No, Vernon swallowed difficultly. Very good, I nodded. Then wait for me to return and settle the child support. I will pay rent every year from now on, and in return, you can no longer interfere in my affairs. Consider that room rented to me. Can you do that? But you can't... She shrieked half a sentence, then fell silent. I realized what she wanted to say. You can't use magic.
If you had actually said that, I would have thought higher of you for your... Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of movement outside the window, a flash of black robes. I froze. My words changed instantly. For your kindness. Petunia looked confused. I stood at the door, voicing my thoughts in front of the door, having switched from Snape-like sarcasm to Harry-like steadiness, becoming low and weak. Yes, for your kindness. I whispered loud enough for the figure outside to hear. Living in the cupboard because it was closest to the kitchen, making it convenient for me to sneak food when I was unbearably hungry, doing housework to train my practical skills, even getting beaten and scarred all over because I angered you somehow. It was all my fault. After all, who asked me to be a monster? I lowered my eyelids, hiding the cold calculation in my eyes. It wasn't entirely a lie. My own childhood at Spinner's End echoed this misery perfectly. The little monster, the hunger, the beatings from a drunken man. It seems I've come at a bad time? A familiar voice rang out coldly from the doorway. The front door swung open. The black-robed man stood condescendingly on the steps outside, his black eyes gazing coldly at me and the Dursleys behind me. A prominent expression appeared on his face, the suppressed, angry, silky sneer I knew all too well. Did I interrupt your heartfelt exchange, Mr. Potter?
No, I said quickly. I glanced up at him briefly, then lowered my eyelids again, keeping my head down and hunching my shoulders. I was just about to go to Diagon Alley, I whispered. This appearance was exactly the same as the abused child demeanor I had worn before he had corrected my posture months ago. I slipped into it as easily as an old cloak. His face was dark with displeasure. He twitched the corner of his mouth in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then what are you standing there for? Keep up. He spun around abruptly, his black robes carving a crisp arc behind him. By the time the Dursleys reacted, the black figure was already several steps down the path. Hey, who are you? Vernon shouted angrily, chasing out the door. He barely got half a sentence out before he was drowned out by Petunia's suddenly sharp and high-pitched scream. You're that boy from Spinner's End! I looked up from the doorway and glanced at her indifferently. The black figure didn't even turn his head, showing absolutely no reaction to his childhood moniker. I stopped looking at her, went down the steps, and quickened my pace to catch up with him. After exchanging a few whispered words with Madame Malkin, during which he mysteriously received a package, he took me to Gringotts. With his signature gloomy expression, he terrified the goblins into quickly exchanging the muggle money I had extorted from the Dursleys. Although Gringotts' exchange rate was robbery compared to the black market, since he was accompanying me, I wisely kept my mouth shut. The two of us stepped out of Gringotts' main bronze doors. Amidst the relieved bows of the goblins, he asked coldly, I assume you have nothing else to buy? No, I hesitated for a moment, but answered this way. In fact, I hadn't bought my new books for the second year. But I knew perfectly well that this was just a routine question before he dumped me back at the Dursleys. Taking it seriously would be foolish, and I also didn't want to hear him mock my shopping list. He grabbed my collar again. An uncomfortable squeezing sensation later, we returned to Privet Drive. Thank you for today, Professor. I breathed a sigh of relief, taking a few steps back to create distance. It's getting late, so I'll go back now. Before I could turn around, I heard him say lazily, Wait. Potter, what did you think I brought you to Diagon Alley for? My heart sank. I had an ominous premonition. Why, Professor? A teasing look suddenly appeared on his face. He walked straight towards the Dursleys' house, saying maliciously, For that bag of ingredients, of course. Potter, I don't need to remind you what we agreed upon before the holidays, do I? My left hand clenched under my loose sleeve, fingernails digging into my palm. No need. He smirked unceremoniously. Summer vacation also falls under the scope of no supervision, so the ingredients are confiscated. Understood?
I followed silently, my face gloomy. He seemed to have no thought of politely greeting the house. He waved his wand to open the pristine white door, and then, amidst the screams of Petunia and Dudley, stepped into the living room as if he owned the place. My eyes shifted slightly. My expression became thoughtful. I quickened my pace into the living room. "Professor Snape, please wait. I'll go bring the ingredients down." He narrowed his eyes and immediately drawled a refusal. "No need. Potter, lead the way." He obviously suspected that I wanted to take the opportunity to hide some of the stash. I lowered my eyelids in acquiescence, hiding the depth in my eyes, and turned to go upstairs. Actually, I didn't think I could hide anything from him. I just wanted to maximize the utility of Snape's visit to the Dursleys. If I was going to lose my ingredients, I was going to gain something else. It seemed that he had taken the bait. He stepped on the wooden stairs, ignoring the panicked family following him. He saw me turn into the room at the end of the corridor. He walked in. Then he saw Harry Potter's room. I saw him freeze. His expression went gloomy instantly. The cramped room was crammed with broken toys and shabby miscellaneous items. The only table and wardrobe were stuffed full of Dudley's junk. Thick dust covered every corner. It looked like a storage room for garbage, not a person's bedroom. Hedwig was perched on the bed because there was nowhere else. My trunk was on the floor. Apart from this, not a single thing belonging to Harry Potter. No photos, no posters, no personality. The bare light bulb emitted a dim, mellow light, illuminating the bleakness. Messy, shabby, and cold. I knew exactly what he was seeing. This environment reminded him of Spinner's End. It reminded of us. As he surveyed all this, I squatted on the ground with a calm expression, digging out the bag of ingredients from my trunk. "Professor, here you go." I stood up, letting a faint hint of heartache show in my eyes as I handed over the bag. "Don't you intend to explain?" He looked down into my eyes, not taking the ingredients. Instead, he swept an unpleasant look around the room. "I haven't hidden any potion ingredients." I defended myself seriously and somewhat aggrievedly. He stared at me. No, he was thinking, it isn't that little Potter doesn't intend to say it, he seems completely unaware of it. Moving from a dark, cramped cupboard to a small storage room to sleep? Who would be picky for more? Be grateful. At least there's a light bulb. Just as he had become accustomed to his father's drunken rages, Harry Potter was accustomed to being a non-entity in his own home. I saw his gaze grow darker than the deepest dungeon. His corners of his mouth twisted upward into a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile I knew meant someone was about to suffer immensely. "Stay there," he said concisely. Then he spun around abruptly, his black robes carving a crisp arc behind him. I stood there, holding the bag. I actually sensed killing intent radiating from his retreating back. Success. The small bedroom's broken wooden door slammed shut, cutting off the view of the black silhouette disappearing aggressively down the corridor. I hurried to the door, reaching for the handle. Click. It was locked. I keenly sensed the magic humming on the wood, a locking charm, and woven into it, an alert charm. This thoroughly shattered my idea of cracking the door open to eavesdrop. I pressed my ear against the wood as hard as possible, straining to guess the commotion downstairs. Was that Petunia screaming? I could barely make out intermittent sentences hissing through the floorboards. Nephew, I regret that I forgot you don't know what son of your own sister means. Do you need me to explain? Accio Dictionary. Apologies, I forgot again. A household that raises a son into the state couldn't possibly have a dictionary. Personal attack. This is Dursley. I am merely stating facts. Am I mistaken? Could it be that your son is playing outside rather than being this ugly, fat,
300-pound giant baby sitting in front of me? Thinking about it this way, I feel the entire wizarding world should thank you, madam. Fortunately, you didn't raise Potter as your own son. Yes, we don't need a piglet savior. Then silence. A buzzing sound filled the air. It seems Snape realized the volume of his sarcasm was a bit too high for Muggle ears outside the house. He had cast Muffliato. I held back my laughter until my insides were nodding. I gave up and left the door, sitting on the bare mattress to wait. What a pity. I really wanted to hear myself deliver a full set of classic venomous quotes. Just imagining the Dursleys' faces at this moment filled me with schadenfreude. It was an honor, really. Not many people could listen to him finish a whole monologue without interruption. The door opened again soon after. I reflexively put away my smile and looked over with a bewildered expression. Snape strode in looking refreshed, his entire demeanor imposing and lighter, like he had just shed a heavy burden. "Pack your things," he ordered. Go where?" I asked, feeling a bit of genuine disbelief. "Living room." He took another step towards the door before turning back, scanning me once. A mixture of triumph and mockery suddenly appeared on his face. After all, tidying up the room will take some time. Behind him, Vernon and Petunia came up timidly. Their faces were full of suppressed anger, but they said nothing. They dawdled into my room armed with brooms and rags. Vernon's face had turned a deep purple again, but he still didn't shout. Instead, he secretly glared at Snape from the corner of his eye, looking very aggrieved. I was more than a little curious about what exactly Snape had threatened him with to make Vernon Dursley so obedient. "Hurry up," Snape urged impatiently. I had no choice but to grab Hedwig's cage and follow him downstairs. In the living room, Dudley was huddled on the small sofa, pale-faced and dumbstruck. He looked like he had seen a Dementor. Seeing Snape walk down the stairs, he shrank back again, lowering his head as if trying hard to make himself invisible. A chilling atmosphere lingered in the room. This was probably the first time in Dudley Dursley's smooth-sailing life of over a decade that he had been mocked so comprehensively. How pitiful. His first encounter with criticism was a baptism by Professor Snape's full-powered venomous tongue. I selectively forgot how I myself had roasted the Dursley family before leaving the house. Compared to Snape, I was an amateur. With Professor Snape's friendly supervision, the Dursley couple's cleaning speed was surprisingly fast. In just half an hour, the small bedroom looked brand new. The junk that should have been thrown away long ago was tossed directly out of the small window by Uncle Vernon into a skip below. The desk, wardrobe, and floor were wiped dust-free by Aunt Petunia. The bed even had a new set of sheets and duvet covers, crisp and clean. The cleared-out space was now much more spacious, barely passing for a real bedroom. "Potter, put your luggage down." Snape pursed his lips meanly, scrutinized the room critically for a long time, and finally gave the order. Vernon and Petunia, panting heavily, finally breathed a sigh of relief and wiped their sweat. I did as told cheerfully. Hedwig hooted and flew onto the top of the clean wardrobe, remaining motionless, appearing very satisfied with the upgrade. Only then did Snape cross his arms over his chest. He turned to me, speaking methodically for the benefit of my guardians. "Mr. Potter, I will be supervising you from now on. Assuming you brew any potion exceeding the magic level of a first year during the summer vacation, do not doubt I will know immediately. At that time, you will certainly be happy to experience the feeling of turning into a Kneazle, or choose to have intimate contact with 2 buckets of flobberworms." He said such threatening words with a faint smile, his black pupils looking down at Petunia firstly. His gaze was very severe and terrifying. Suppressing my laughter, I nodded seriously and repeated, "Professor, I will. If I can't do it, let me turn into a Kneazle or squeeze 2 buckets of flobberworms." Petunia's expression became even more fearful. Vernon's face started turning green at the mention of worms. "Wow, I simply can't wait," I said, shaking my head as if sighing with emotion. I could barely hold back the laughter in my throat. Snape glared at me annoyingly. He realized I was mocking him.
He flung his robes, turned, and disappeared with a crack. Gone. Smack. Uncle Vernon threw the broom on the floor in a huff, the sound startling me. "Boy!" Vernon's face was a deep purple. He pointed at me through gritted teeth, panting a few times but daring not to come over. "Now you're satisfied?" he roared. Petunia stood aside without saying much, just lowering her head to look at the wall, her expression somewhat guilty. I took in their expressions. I restrained my smile on my face, said nothing more, and took out the stack of Muggle banknotes that I had exchanged at Gringotts. The angry expression froze on Vernon's face. "This is only part of the child support. In 2 days, I will give you the remaining part, and then we'll be even." I looked at them coolly. "From now on, consider me a landlord. You don't need to worry about my meals, and I won't trouble you otherwise." I glanced at the rejuvenated small bedroom and added with a half smile, "Even a rented hotel room outside would at least be clean and tidy, right?" Vernon deflated like a punctured ball. He was completely speechless. Harry," Petunia called out with an uneasy expression, seeming to want to say something. I stuffed the banknotes into Vernon's hand, interrupting her. "All right, if there's nothing else, go out. I'm going to sleep." It was late. Having nothing more to say, the two left the small room, closing the door behind them. I looked back at this newly renovated small bedroom and finally relaxed. From now on, this was the place I would return to for several months every year. It was livable. I walked towards the bed, then suddenly paused. I felt something incongruous in the room. I looked around suspiciously, my right hand quietly gripping my wand. My gaze finally locked behind the half-open wardrobe door. There seemed to be something in the empty wardrobe. I was very sure that when Vernon showed off their cleaning results just now, there was nothing there. I cautiously raised my wand, then realizing the magic signature, I frowned and put the wand back. I hesitated. Slowly, I reached out and pushed open the wardrobe door. Sitting on the shelf was a familiar brown paper package. I recognized it instantly. It was the package that Snape had taken from Madame Malkin this afternoon. With a complex expression, I untied the string on the package. I slowly took the items out, spread them on my lap, and looked closely. Sure enough, they were 2 sets of very well-fitting, simple shirts and pants. Muggle clothes, in Harry Potter size. He had actually bought clothes for me. I covered my eyes with a hand, feeling a headache coming on. I let out a long, shuddering sigh. "Severus, you sentimental fool."
Headaches aside, I still had to wear the clothes. After all, none of Harry's Muggle clothes fit. At school, I could at least wear his wizard robes over them to hide the disgrace, but since returning, the strange, pitying looks from Muggles had made me very uncomfortable. It stirred up some unpleasant memories for me, memories of ill-fitting coats and a mother's sad smile. A few days later, I went to Diagon Alley Inn to purchase a batch of potion ingredients. Due to the threat from himself, I indeed couldn't brew any potions beyond the magical level of a first year without triggering his surveillance. This significantly limited my choices for making money. So for the entire next month, I shut myself in my room like a hermit crab. I spent my days brewing simple potions, boil cure, forgetfulness potion that had low costs and low selling prices. I required a huge quantity to scrape together enough for the child support. Because the Basilisk ingredients had been confiscated by Snape, my grand idea of secretly brewing high-level potions during the summer vacation was shattered. Although I didn't say anything, I had been brooding over it for days. Even though he had helped me scold the Dursleys and bought me 2 sets of clothes, I still planned to take revenge on myself when the opportunity arose. Who was I? Fundamentally, I was still Severus Snape. My heart was smaller than a needle tip, and I would always seek vengeance. Now I just needed to wait patiently for school to start. By late July, when I handed the last batch of money to Vernon Dursley, I finally felt relieved. "Now we owe each other nothing," I hissed. Looking at my complexion, Vernon's lips moved, but for once he said nothing. After all, I'd shut myself in my room for weeks. My hair was completely unkempt, tangled into a messy bird's nest. There were dark circles under my eyes, and due to my reverse sleep schedule and fumes, my complexion was tending towards yellowish again. I looked exhausted and unkempt, yet I felt perfectly normal. Clutching the banknotes with greedy fingers, Vernon hesitated at the door. He seemed to want to say something, but stopped. I raised an eyebrow in confusion. Is there something else? Vernon cleared his throat, seeming to consider how to articulate his next words clearly.
Actually, today is an important day, as we all know. What? I was baffled. The day I make the biggest deal of my life, Vernon emphasized heavily, puffing out his chest. Perhaps I should say congratulations, I sneered, losing interest in the conversation. If there's nothing else, I'm closing the door. Wait! Vernon stared intently at me with his small piggy eyes, his voice unexpectedly cramped. I mean, you won't be going out today, will you? His speech sped up considerably, wearing those strange clothes of yours, walking through the living room with that owl, holding weird things or making loud noises in your room. I understood now. He was ashamed of me. Why, whether a tenant wants to go out should be his own freedom, I said smoothly, narrowing my eyes as I saw his face turn purple again in an instant. However, it just so happens that I plan to read in my room all day. I thoughtfully dragged out my words, lowering my volume. No owl, no loud noises, no going out. Satisfied? Vernon nodded somewhat dazedly, seeming to lack confidence in my promise. It's best if you can do that. He stumbled down the stairs, looking back at me one more time. I closed the door calmly. Compared to his attitude as if facing a fierce flood or savage beast, I didn't plan to think too much about it. When others didn't provoke me, agreeing to trivial matters to ensure peace for both sides was not a strange logic. It was pragmatic. The moment I closed the door and turned my head, my face darkened. On my thin little bed, a creature had appeared silently. Bat-like ears, bulging green eyes as big as tennis balls. This creature was wearing a tattered but clean pillowcase as a toga. "Mr. Harry Potter," it squeaked. It jumped off the bed and bowed deeply to me, its long nose tip touching the dusty carpet. "House elf," I said in a complex voice laced with a trace of disgust, swallowing the second half of my sentence. "Dobby." I recognized him immediately. This was the house elf of Harry's good friend, Lucius Malfoy. Now, the question was, what was the Dark Lord's #1 henchman doing sending a house elf to his archenemy's house? At the same time, I heard the front door open downstairs. Dudley's clumsy voice sounded exceptionally gentle and polite right now. "Mr. and Mrs. Mason, may I take your coats?" It seems the targets of Uncle Vernon's biggest deal of this life had arrived. "Mr. Harry Potter, Dobby is honored, so honored to meet you." The house elf in front of me continued to squeak, looking up at me with excitement. "Haha, I bet Dudley forgot to turn off the TV upstairs, that little rascal." Vernon's fake and exaggerated laughter sounded out loudly from downstairs. He sounded very guilty and annoyed. I frowned instantly. Quiet! Dobby's voice was too penetrating, but constrained by the rule prohibiting underage magic outside school, I couldn't even cast a muffliato. Dobby stopped talking immediately, staring intently at me with reverent and adoring eyes, his expression full of joy. He seemed to be waiting for me to say something profound. I felt uncomfortable all over under that gaze. My voice involuntarily softened as I asked dryly, "You said your name is Dobby, so do you have business here today?" "Oh, yes, sir. Dobby. This matter is somewhat difficult. Dobby doesn't know where to begin." The elf's expression became distressed and somewhat fearful. "Then take your time," I comforted him, while glancing discreetly at the wardrobe. Before leaving weeks ago, Snape had cast a spell on that wardrobe. Because I couldn't use magic right now, I couldn't figure out exactly what spell it was, but due to my former mastery, I could vaguely sense its existence. Given what he had said, I guessed it was some kind of spell that detected if the magical energy in the room exceeded a standard he set. However, if Snape was still concerned about whether the Petunia family would continue to mistreat me, then the spell was definitely not a trigger detection spell, but something like an alarm spell. In that case, I could still take a gamble. Dobby suddenly shook his head, looking distressed. Then, abruptly, he leapt up and banged his head violently against the window bars. "Bad Dobby! Bad Dobby!" The iron bars rattled loudly, creating a huge racket. My face darkened as I lowered my voice to a hiss. "Stop it!" Dobby banged a few more times before stopping pitifully, clutching his ears. "Mr. Harry Potter! Dobby must punish himself. Dobby could not do this." I keenly sensed something from Dobby's self-punishment. "Dobby," I asked in disbelief, "did you sneak out?" Huge breaking news. Since when could a house elf disobey its master's orders and sneak out on its own? This was unprecedented. Yes, Dobby sobbed. "Then, Dobby, why did you sneak out to see me?" I asked while distracted, listening to the movement downstairs. It was quiet down there. I could faintly hear the crisp clinking of wine glasses. Petunia and the lady were talking in low, fast voices. "Protect me.
I asked skeptically. Most of my attention was now on the wardrobe, figuring out how to trigger that spell without using magic, so as to summon him. Presumably seeing a strange house elf would mislead him into some interesting conjectures about my safety. Yes, protect Mr. Harry Potter. Dobby suddenly wiped away his tears, looked straight at me, and said loudly, Harry Potter must not return to Hogwarts. I slowly narrowed my eyes. My voice also became soft and slow, asking gently and silkily, why can't I return to Hogwarts? Is this your own idea, Dobby? Yes, there will be great danger at Hogwarts, Dobby said while slapping his ears desperately, unable to bear the betrayal of his master. Harry Potter must stay in a safe place. Do you know something? I asked thoughtfully, connecting it to the biggest danger in Potter's second year, Mr. Basilisk being unexplainably released. It makes sense if Lucius was the mastermind. Only, it seems Lucius didn't know yet that the Basilisk had been killed by me. My pursed lips curled into a teasing arc. A plot! Dobby knew about it months ago. Dobby continued to cry out. Silence fell downstairs. Vernon's laughter sounded even more guilty and loud. Kids these days watch such noisy TV. Dudley, go turn off the TV. Dudley agreed, and then heavy footsteps began coming up the stairs. Stop your wailing! My voice was low, almost a whisper. I was very annoyed right now, failing to do what I promised Vernon, keeping quiet, and making a fool of myself in front of strange muggles. This realization made my face burn. Get in the wardrobe, I hissed. I heard Dudley's footsteps stop outside the door, seemingly hesitating whether to knock. Mr. Harry Potter! Dobby reflexively walked towards the wardrobe while still trying to shout something, unwilling to give up. I don't want to go back either, I interrupted, lying smoothly. Now shut up and stay quiet. Dobby's expression turned pleasantly surprised. He stopped talking and hid obediently in the wardrobe to wait. I hurriedly opened the door and said to Dudley with a grim face, You should go downstairs. Dobby immediately heaved a long sigh of relief and turned back without a word. It seems he had indeed been badly scared by Snape last time. I quickly closed the door and turned back to see Dobby poking his head out of the wardrobe, asking hopefully in a small voice, Mr. Harry Potter, do you really plan not to return to Hogwarts? That's right, I said smoothly, but you also understand, I am a student. Unless there's a special reason, I can't just not return to school. Dobby's eyes couldn't help but dart towards the door. I raised an eyebrow and sneered, Do you think muggles can stop a professor or the headmaster from coming to check on me? My left hand quietly gripped the slender glass bottle in my pocket, a fail-safe potion I had brewed. So Harry Potter needs... Dobby seemed to have a sudden realization. He pointed a long finger at me and said, I'm sorry, but this is for Mr. Harry Potter's own good. In that instant, I felt the sense of danger skyrocket. Without thinking, I flung the glass bottle from my pocket towards the wardrobe. Dobby dodged agilely to the side, interrupting his magic. The slender glass bottle smashed against the inner wall of the wardrobe, then fell and shattered. The gray liquid soaked into the wooden bottom. Potion! Dobby turned to check the situation, shook his head looking somewhat sorrowful. How kind Mr. Harry Potter is. This cannot deal with Dobby. However, my other eyebrow raised high and a perfect fake smile appeared on my face. But someone else can deal with you. What? Dobby was startled. Before he could blink, the wardrobe, triggered by the magical potion soaking into its wood, emitted a sharp
crack. The air in the small room twisted violently. A tall figure in billowing black robes apparated instantly into the center of the room, wand drawn, face livid with rage and concern. Severus Snape had arrived.
I shrugged, leisurely stepping aside to reveal the small window behind me. In the darkness outside, the spot above the flower bed where the Privet Drive street sign should have been visible was now abruptly blocked by a black silhouette. In the next moment, a soft crack resonated in the room. The silhouette vanished from outside and then reappeared behind me, wrapped in the cold night wind. Potter, I believe I warned you that if you brewed any potion exceeding the magical level of a first year, I would turn you into a Kneazle. He glared at me, his face gloomy and enraged. The potions professor looked terrifyingly angry at that moment, the chill radiating from him making me shiver involuntarily. He roared, and you damned well ruined a cauldron of my precious potion. With my back to him, I didn't panic at all. I smirked teasingly at Dobby before slowly turning around. The expression on my face was a calculated mix of panic and forbearance, flashing for an instant before settling into a blank, emotionless mask. I lowered my eyelids and apologized calmly, as if nothing had happened. "I'm sorry, Professor Snape." As I expected, his gaze lingered hesitantly on my face for only a moment before turning to the house elf. His expression shifted from gloomy to tempestuous. "Dobby," he questioned, his voice mean and dangerous, "what are you doing here?" Respected Mr. Snape, Dobby was just... Dobby, did Lucius send you?" Snape's expression grew even darker, his questioning laced with mockery. "Could it be for an autograph? The famous Mr. Potter truly has many admirers. Why don't you two take a picture together?" His gaze swept over the shattered glass bottle in the wardrobe, the chaotic luggage on the floor, and the Potter brat with a terrible complexion standing beside it. Finally, it settled back on the panic-stricken elf. "Dobby," I added gently at the right moment, inserting myself into the narrative. "I appreciate your good intentions, but I don't think injuring me is a good idea." Snape raised an eyebrow. As if I hadn't seen it, I continued. "With current medical standards, ordinary injuries can be healed in a short while. Severe injuries, you might never see Harry Potter again. Perhaps a mad Potter or a delirious Potter would be left in this world. Do you think this is any different from letting me face danger at Hogwarts?" "Is that so? Lucius would actually give such an order," Snape said coldly. "It seems I'll have to give his brain a makeover." The poor elf trembled even harder, its lips moving but unable to make a sound. It looked at Snape fearfully, shuddered violently once more, then suddenly vanished from the spot. Pop! I blinked, seemingly a bit regretful that the problem had been solved so easily. He didn't speak to me either. Pursing his lips with a dark face, he began to wave his wand, tracing complex trajectories in the air to cast spells over me. I recognized them immediately. Diagnostic spells from St. Mungo's, much more detailed than the simple ones commonly used by school nurses. My eyebrows twitched slightly, but I showed no expression, waiting leisurely for myself to finish the examination. After a good while, the black figure lowered his wand, glaring down at me without speaking. "Polyjuice potion," I said with a hint of ingratiation, explaining the shattered bottle. I knew perfectly well that his anger was currently directed entirely at Dobby and perhaps at stupid Lucius, so I knew exactly what to say to deflect. Dobby suddenly said there would be danger at Hogwarts, so he wanted to stop me from going. He wanted to injure me, but I couldn't use spells. I pointed to the wardrobe. That was the only thing I had on hand just now. "Professor Snape, you arrived just in time." A trace of embarrassment floated onto his gaunt cheeks. He realized he had accused me wrongly about ruining his potion. That emotion was fleeting. He reverted to his expressionless, gloomy demeanor, lightly raised his wand and raised an eyebrow at the same time. "Malnutrition, functional disorder, and your current appearance, tisk. Did you spend this summer vacation in a slum?" I still looked haggard, with a pale face and dark eyes under my eyes. My hair was messy because I hadn't had time to tidy up before encountering Dobby. His expression turned disdainful and he continued, "Mr. Potter, you really are just like your father, making quite a spectacle of yourself." Unconcealed disgust showed in those black eyes as he critically examined the top of my head. My shoulders trembled. I clenched my fists in restraint. I avoided his gaze. My voice became cold and hard. "Does Professor Snape have anything else to say? If not, please leave. There's no need to look at my disgusting face." My words came from the bottom of my heart. Merlin's pants! If he hadn't reminded me, I would have completely forgotten that I hadn't washed my hair in a long time. I could hardly imagine how much my currently messy hairstyle resembled James Potter. Just thinking about it made me want to vomit. Usually I tried my best to comb it smooth to differentiate myself. Heavens know how much I hated looking in the mirror and seeing that man. I just hoped he would leave quickly so I could go deal with this damned hairstyle properly. His mocking sneer paused. His expression slowly retracted and a flicker of apology flashed quickly through his eyes. He had realized what he had just said. To this day, Snape's loathing for the older Potter did not diminish at all, but his feelings toward little Potter were complex. At the very least, he felt he shouldn't take his anger at the father out on the son who looked like a wraith. Truly unreasonable bias, he scolded himself, but why? Little Potter clearly has that face.
that familiar damned hairstyle, and was equally reckless and arrogant. The more he scrutinized me, the more alarmed he became, daring not to think further. He waved his wand hastily, setting up a circle of protective spells in the room. He spoke with a composed face, adopting a professor stance. If Dobby comes again, I will know. As for you, Mr. Potter, if you violate the rules one more time, then 2 buckets of flobberworms will really be your companions. Before I could nod, he seemed to remember something suddenly. He raised his wand. Accio Polyjuice Potion. My face instantly became very unpleasant. Glass bottles rose from my trunk one by one and flew towards him. After collecting the potion bottles, he only gave me a mean smirk. All confiscated. I clenched my fists, understanding the situation. I endured it and said nothing. Polyjuice Potion was the only potion in my trunk that exceeded the first-year level, intended to facilitate my entry and exit from Nocturne Alley to sell goods. All the Polyjuice Potion present had taken me a long time to gather the ingredients and brew. He glanced at me, showing no reaction to my terrible expression, and left directly amidst a crack. Only then did I relax my shoulders and sit on the edge of the bed with a gloomy face. The series of events today was truly terrible, but compared to my previous life, it was bearable. There was no need to worry about Dobby anymore. If the danger referred to was the Basilisk, he would definitely go talk to Lucius. The trouble was that all the Polyjuice Potion had been confiscated. If I were to make or buy more, I would have to spend a long time making those cheap potions again. Being restricted to making only first-year potions really tied my hands too much, although I knew this was Snape doing it for my own good. I sighed, lay down on the bed, and closed my eyes weirdly. Crack, crack! 2 almost simultaneous sounds rang in the room. I shot up again with quick reflexes, glaring vigilantly around the room. Silence. There was no one else in the small bedroom, as if the noise just now had been my auditory hallucination. I scanned the room, my suspicious gaze locking onto the wardrobe. Sure enough, there seemed to be something in the empty wardrobe again. Is my brain malfunctioning? Why again? I jumped off the bed in annoyance, strode over, and pushed open the wardrobe door. On the slightly damp bottom of the wardrobe, a package lay quietly. I picked up the package unpleasantly and saw a line of handwriting on it. It was written in his most commonly used dark green ink, carrying a faint scent of potion fumes. Scribbled on the package was 1992-731. I was a bit confused. Why did he write today's date? I thought for a long time, but couldn't make heads or tails, so I just opened the package directly. I widened my eyes involuntarily. The bag of Basilisk ingredients I had lost and regained. In an instant, I came up with several ways to turn these ingredients into potions or galleens. But this was too weird. Why did he suddenly return this? I knew perfectly well the attraction of rare potion ingredients to Severus Snape. Any Snape was the same. What was in his mouth would absolutely not be spat out. I placed the ingredients carefully on the table, then took the piece of wrapping paper that hadn't been destroyed and examined the handwriting on it. I suddenly jolted, my mind going a bit blank. Wait, isn't July 31st Little Potter's birthday? No. How could he possibly go out of his way to give Potter a birthday present? Could it be that he felt that since I killed the Basilisk after all, he didn't want to be involved with me anymore, so he returned my share to signify a clean break? I guessed suspiciously. That had to be it. It was the only logical explanation.
Late at night, I lay in bed, feeling not the slightest bit sleepy. With this bag of recovered ingredients, I now had plenty of choices, whether for buying books or brewing materials for profit. I could finally relax for the time being. I turned my face sideways, frowning as I picked up the scrap of wrapping paper with the scrawl handwriting, examining it carefully by the moonlight filtering through the bars at the head of the bed. 1992.7.31. Actually, I felt there was something unusual about this handwriting. I was very familiar with my own handwriting. Usually, it was slender, sharp, and spiky, serious like the person himself. But today, this date was scrawled very sloppily. It looked forced, as if done deliberately to disguise the hand. I speculated idly in my mind. Was Snape reluctant when delivering the ingredients? Was he angry? Or did he not want Harry Potter to guess who the sender was? Feels a bit like self-deception, I thought dryly. I shook my head, refusing to think more of it. I tucked the scrap of paper under my pillow.
a sentimental weakness I would never admit to anyone, and lay down to sleep. Early the next morning, I went out. I had originally planned to buy my new second-year books early, settling one matter quickly, but I hadn't expected. I seemed to have chosen the wrong time. Yes, you heard right. You are about to get the real me at Hogwarts. Here, have another signed photo. A flashy, preening male voice rang out from very close by. A flashy man stood at the entrance of Flourish and Blots, speaking loudly, flanked by several tall stacks of his own books. The curly golden hair was plastered with enough gel to drown a flobberworm. When he smiled, he revealed shiny white teeth that seemed to sparkle with a charm. A wave of his hand caused screams and commotion among many middle-aged witches in Diagon Alley, knocking over the books directly and causing chaos. Absolutely terrible, I muttered with disgust. Gilderoy Lockhart. I bent down, impatiently squeezing through the large crowd of excited, brainless sheep. I barely managed to drag the books I wanted to buy out of the surging crowd at Flourish and Blots without cursing someone. It turned out that today was Lockhart's book signing event. I had a fresh memory of this former colleague. I really didn't want to waste a single breath on this incompetent peacock. But I hadn't expected that even after leaving the blast radius of Flourish and Blots, the streets of Diagon Alley would also be in chaos. A massive body suddenly squeezed through the crowd outside, shouting, "Stop! Arthur, your son is watching!" "Ow! Who hit me? Stop! Everyone stop! No fighting!" Hagrid's familiar, booming voice shouted over the din. People around screamed as they watched the half-giant stretch out his massive arms, physically separating two fighting adult wizards, one in each hand. Arthur Weasley stood panting beside his son, his expression still indignant, his robes torn. On the other side, Lucius Malfoy glared at him equally. His long, usually pristine golden hair was a messy disaster. One of his gray eyes was rapidly turning black. He was completely devoid of his usual aristocratic elegance. You worry all you want, Weasley. I reckon there isn't even half a galleon left in your family vault. Is there? Planning to make your son's copybooks by hand, Popper? He mocked loudly and unceremoniously. Look who's talking. Look at that black eye. You have the nerve to talk about others. Arthur Weasley retorted, unwilling to be outdone. The two stared at each other like red-eyed roosters, still eyeing each other menacingly. I coughed fakely into my fist, almost unable to suppress the laughter in my throat. Seeing Lucius Malfoy in such an undignified state made coming today worthwhile. What a pity I couldn't use this to mock him in the future without blowing my cover. Mind your own business first. Malfoy angrily bumped Arthur's shoulder, strode past him, and called out coldly over his shoulder, "Draco, let's go." I immediately turned my head. I saw that usually spirited Draco looking pale and listless as he walked out of the crowd following his father who had lost all his grace. I tried desperately to suppress my laughter again. It seemed young Draco had taken a heavy blow to his pride, seeing his father brawling like a muggle. "Molly, Ginny, let's go." Arthur also straightened his collar and walked towards the other side with a straight face. My eyes focused. Now. I hurriedly rushed over, holding my stack of books, and bumped directly into the youngest red-haired girl. Thump. "Oh, sorry," I quickly said with a look of panic, bending down to pick up the books scattered on the ground. "Isn't this Harry?" Molly Weasley exclaimed in surprise from the side. Ginny froze. She looked up at me, her cheeks instantly flushing redder than her hair. She bit her lip and remained silent out of shyness. "You are..." I feigned confusion. "Have you forgotten? I'm Ron's mother. He mentions you all the time at home." Ron is still queuing inside. He'll be out in a moment. I picked up all the fallen books, including the battered transformation manual she had dropped, and returned them to Ginny's cauldron. My hand brushed against something cool and sleek inside her cauldron, a black notebook. "Lucius," I thought with a mental sneer, "you slipped it in during the fight." "Sorry, I have something to do later. I'll chat with Ron by letter when I get back," I said, politely refusing. My original purpose lay with that notebook, and now that I had confirmed it was there and realized I couldn't take it right under Molly's nose without suspicion, I had to retreat and plan. Or maybe I had confirmed it was there. After declining Molly's enthusiastic invitations several times, she was a terrifying force of nature. I finally managed to rush out of the leaky cauldron clutching my own books. Women, I frowned heavily, panting heavily. Unable to cope, I tugged uncomfortably at my crumpled shirt. Truly terrifying. I returned to Privet Drive. Wait, in the confusion, had I managed to swap it? No, Lucius had put it in Ginny's cauldron. I had bumped into her. Correction, I had managed to swipe it. It was a risky move, a sleight of hand worthy of a pickpocket, but I had done it while picking up her books. Back in my small bedroom, I poured some newly bought owl treats onto the table for Hedwig. Watching her eat, I then placed the black notebook on the table. I couldn't use magic right now, but I could vaguely sense a faint fluctuation from the diary. It was dark, cold. It seemed like a magical object, yet also not like one. I pursed my lips. I carefully put on dragonhide gloves, and for insurance, I took out a basilisk fang from the package Snape had returned, before flipping open the title page of the diary. Dragonhide to prevent contact curses, basilisk venom to destroy it instantly if it bit. Empty. The scene before me was somewhat outside my expectations. The entire notebook was empty inside, with not a single word, nor were there any curses or vicious attacks as I had imagined. I thought for a moment. I dipped a quill in ink and tried writing on the diary. Tuesday. The dark green ink outlined slender, elongated handwriting on the page, so scrawled that I could barely recognize it. But very quickly, the writing disappeared completely, sucked into the paper. A new line of writing appeared out of thin air on the diary. Hello. That was a completely new, unfamiliar handwriting. The script was graceful and ornate, pleasing to the eye. My expression paused for an instant. I pulled back to swiftly scrutinize the diary again from a safe distance before tentatively writing a sentence. Who are you? The line of beautiful handwriting seemed to hesitate on how to respond. After a pause of a few seconds, it wrote back, I am a soul that has been sealed away for a long time. I'm sorry, I really couldn't resist talking to you. I just wanted a friend. I raised an eyebrow uncommittally. A friend? How touching. Seeming to guess my disbelief, new writing quickly emerged on the diary. This time the writing was somewhat messy and hurried, as if the writer was eager to prove himself. Really, if you have any troubles, I can help you solve them too. I just haven't spoken to anyone for a long time. I am very lonely. Tom Riddle, that is my name. And you? I pondered with raised eyebrows, my gaze dark and deep. My quill hesitated to descend. No new writing appeared on the diary. That person, that thing, was waiting patiently for me. After a long while, I finally made up my mind. I needed a name, a fake identity, something that wouldn't ring bells but felt ironical. I wrote in the diary, Abby. My name is Abby Prince.
After 2 weeks of playing pen pals with a suspicious magical artifact, I finally had a better understanding of the situation. This person in the diary, who called himself Tom Riddle, was indeed completely ignorant of current events. The current era, the political landscape, the state of Hogwarts. Riddle had been beating around the bush, using charm and flattery to pry for information. He claimed to have been a Slytherin student with excellent grades. This was a calculated move to encourage Abby Prince, my fictional alter ego, to ask him for help with homework, thereby building trust. I had already used my scrawl, so messy I could barely recognize it myself, to tacitly admit that I was currently a student and a new second-year Gryffindor at that. Yet Riddle remained gentle, patient, and overly friendly. Looking at it with an adult's cynical eyes, that attitude was excessively accommodating for a brilliant Slytherin talking to a whining Gryffindor nobody. But I was still unclear about what exactly this Tom Riddle wanted, so I played along. I pretended to be a guileless, somewhat dim-witted child and let slip information like breadcrumbs leading into a trap. Abby, I know there are always some popular figures in school. Your Gryffindor house probably has some too, right? Riddle asked casually, the ink appearing smoothly on the page. Definitely, I wrote back, scratching Hedwig under her chin with my free hand. For example, Percy Weasley,
who is always first in grades. He's also a prefect, and the professors love to praise him. I'm so envious. Unlike me, no matter how hard I study, my grades just won't go up. Don't be discouraged. I'll help you when school starts, Riddle quickly comforted me. Then he pivoted, asking seemingly carelessly, then what about Slytherin? Is there anyone like that? I raised my eyebrow. Here we go. My expression became much more serious as I hurried to write. There is! Draco Malfoy. He's the most arrogant person in Slytherin. After all, his father is Lucius Malfoy. Malfoy. The Malfoy family has indeed always been very prestigious. After all, they are very close with, right? He probed. A look of realization flashed in my eyes. Pursing my lips mischievously, I decided to deliberately misinterpret his meaning. Do you mean Professor Snape? He is a friend of young Malfoy's father. I heard they are indeed very close. Professor Snape? Riddle must have been stunned. The ink paused for a few seconds before he composed his words. I should know the positions of all the professors at Hogwarts. This Professor Snape, yes, I remember he seems to be... He teaches potions, Tom. Did you actually forget? He's the head of your Slytherin house. I wrote in a tone of disbelief. Oh, of course. Riddle's handwriting quickly surfaced. I mean, you certainly don't know about Professor Snape's student days, do you? Wrong, Mr. Diary. The person who knows Professor Snape best in the world is probably sitting right in front of you, mocking you with the quill. Of course I don't know, but that's useless anyway. I played dumb. Riddle didn't give up. He explained gently and patiently, like talking to a slow child. Think about it. To become the head of Slytherin proves that he might have been a popular figure in his student days. His experiences must be quite interesting. Really? Do you mean Professor Snape liked to carry a cauldron on his back every day when he was a student? I interrupted him with idiocy. No, I mean, Professor Snape's experiences must be very interesting. For example, did he join any secret organizations? Riddle's tone began to show impatience. He was getting straight to the point. He probably thought Abby was an utterly obtuse fool. I narrowed my eyes, careful not to push too far. Ah, do you mean Death Eaters? Professor Snape might be a Death Eater? I'm just guessing. After all, he is the head of Slytherin. Actually, I don't quite understand how other houses view Death Eaters. What do you think, Abby? I paused my quill to think. I had been teaching at Hogwarts for over a decade, yet this Tom Riddle had never heard of me. It seemed he was from quite a long time ago. And he was obsessed with the Dark Lord's old recruiting grounds. I decided to drop a bomb. Tom, although I'm sorry to say this, but I think Death Eaters are all cruel and terrible. After all, they are the minions of that demon whose name cannot be mentioned. Riddle was silent for a long time. And I don't think Professor Snape looks much like a Death Eater, because ever since that demon whose name cannot be mentioned died, all the Death Eaters were caught and sent to Azkaban. They should be either dead or mad by now. Speaking of which, I still can't believe that the terrible demon was actually killed by a baby who had just turned 1. But that is the fact. Tom, why have you stopped talking? Oh, I just feel a bit regrettable. You know, boys my age always think joining secret organizations like Death Eaters or some dark faction is cool. By the way, that baby seems to be called... His handwriting looked much more forceful now, the nib digging into the paper. He didn't even bother with subtlety anymore. He disdainfully assumed I was too stupid to notice his intense interest. I was now very certain that Tom Riddle was a person from decades ago, and very likely a Death Eater sympathizer. But who was he? There was no Tom Riddle in the inner circle. Whatever. I needed to know if this diary had any other functions besides being a chatty bore. His name is Harry Potter, I continued to write. He's the same age as me this year, also in Gryffindor. Actually, I quite dislike him. Tom, can you help me teach him a lesson? You said you could help me solve my troubles. The ornate script surfaced immediately. Of course, Abby, I can teach you some ways to teach him a good lesson. But Tom, I don't dare. I wrote, suppressing laughter. You know he's the savior. Everyone revolves around him. If I were caught opposing him, everyone would choose to defend him and then bully me severely. Tom, do you have any other way? Of course there is. Only, Abby, this method might have a small problem, but as long as you're willing, it won't be a problem. Riddle's handwriting regained its elegance. The trap was set. Of course I'm willing, because I hate him. What do you plan to do, Tom? Actually, I have a pet in Hogwarts, a very docile snake. It's very cute, but it was locked up. If you take me to Hogwarts, I can make it recognize you as its master and then secretly give Potter a bite. No one will discover it was you, and you won't need to lift a finger. Yes, a docile and cute snake. I glanced at the basilisk fang sitting on my desk. So the basilisk in Potter's second year was released by this Tom Riddle. It all connected. I raised an eyebrow mischievously. Time to torture him a bit. How can just one bite be enough? It should bite him many times. Otherwise, Potter gets off too easy. Why does he also have to like Professor Snape? He's clearly arrogant and conceited. I really suspect he's a close relative of a troll. Wait, also? Riddle's handwriting went stiff. You like Professor Snape? Abby, I remember you're a boy. Harry Potter is also a boy, but why can he confess publicly without restraint while I have to pretend not to know Professor Snape at all? Do I care if Professor Snape carried a cauldron in his student days? Is he a Death Eater? No! Of course I care very much. But I dare not tell anyone. I have to hide it even from you, a soul in a diary. This is too unfair. Tom, teach me how to pursue Professor Snape. Can you help me? Even through the diary, I could feel the sheer annoyance radiating from Tom Riddle. I wrote while holding back laughter until my ribs hurt. Wait, calm down, Abby. Of course, I will help you pursue Professor Snape. I just need to think carefully. Think carefully before replying to you. Fortunately, Professor Snape is very dissatisfied with Potter. At least he doesn't detest me. Tom, do you think Professor Snape will fall for me, even though I'm a boy? I shook my sore wrist. Oh, he will definitely, Tom Riddle lied through his teeth. Only, Abby, do you still plan to take me to Hogwarts to let the snake take revenge on Potter? He sounded desperate to change the subject.
Of course he will, I said smoothly, my quill scratching across the paper. Never mind that. Tom, let me tell you Professor Snape. Right, I know you like him very much. I'll help you figure something out, Riddle wrote back perfunctorily, the ink thin and hurried. But this will take time. You have to be patient, Abby, patient. All right then, I'll wait for your news. I feigned reluctance, adding a few ink blots for effect. Talk later, Riddle wrote crisply, seizing the opportunity to escape. But I haven't finished. Oh well, talk later, Tom. I closed the diary with immense satisfaction. Tom Riddle was probably breathing a sigh of relief right now, finally rid of the annoying, maddening, stupid boy named Abby Prince. The excuse of liking Professor Snape was surprisingly useful as a psychological torture device. I estimated Riddle wouldn't want to pop out and talk to me for a while. 2 weeks passed uneventfully. September 1st arrived. Uncle Vernon, his face a permanent shade of purple, drove me to King's Cross Station without a single word. He dumped me in my trunk on the pavement and sped off before the engine had even cooled. The platform was bustling. I saw children pushing trolleys with trunks and owl cages. One by one, they ran at the wall between platforms 9 and 10 when no one was looking, vanishing into the magical world. I waited for a gap in the crowd. I aligned my trolley. I ran. Bang. I slammed into solid brick. I fell backwards onto the ground in a wretched heap. My trunk toppled beside me with a crash, and Hedwig's cage rattled violently as she flew up in fright, screeching. Damn it, I cursed angrily, rubbing my shoulder. I had already crashed into it by the time I sensed the barrier's magic was wrong. Although I stopped my momentum in time to avoid a broken nose, I still saw stars. This body was still too frail. But who would have thought the passage to school would be suddenly sealed? Dobby, I realized grimly. "Are you all right, dear?" a woman nearby asked with concern. I had attracted attention. "I'm fine," I said with a frown, picking up my trunk unhappily and standing aside, pretending to wait for a train. To my amazement and fury, after a while, when the muggles looked away, other children could pass through the wall again, but when I went up to try, the wall became solid once more. Someone was targeting me specifically. Fortunately, I had arrived early. There was still a long time before the express departed. I immediately tore a piece of parchment from my trunk, uncorked an ink bottle, and wrote a quick note. "Barrier sealed, stuck at King's Cross. Send help." "Take this note to Professor Dumbledore," I instructed Hedwig, opening her cage. "If you can't find him, give it to Professor McGonagall or any professor. No need to bring a reply. I'll wait here." Hedwig gave a low hoot, flapped her wings, and flew into the sky. I waited. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed in front of me. A familiar man appeared with a triumphant smile, wearing robes of forget-me-not blue. He excitedly grabbed my hand. "Harry! Harry Potter! Oh, I knew it was you. Damn it. The person who came was actually Gilderoy Lockhart." My face turned black immediately. Although I had just said any professor would do, that definitely did not include this peacock. "Wanting to be in the spotlight, aren't you? Saying you're stuck at the station? Lockhart. Professor, could you let go of me first?" I ground out through my teeth. "Look at you. Still shy? That won't do." Lockhart laughed heartily. "As soon as Professor Dumbledore received the note, I volunteered to come pick you up." "Then I really thank you, Professor," I said with a smile that did not reach my eyes. "Shall we? Go back to school?" Don't rush. Let's take a photo together." He pulled out a camera, flashed a blinding smile, and snapped a photo of the two of us before I could escape. I endured with a dark face. "Is that enough, Lockhart? Professor?" He apparated directly with me, arriving in a luxuriously decorated living room that was blindingly shiny everywhere. His house. "My fireplace connects directly to my office at Hogwarts. Let's go," Lockhart explained, grabbing a handful of flue powder. I stepped into the emerald green fire first, shouting impatiently, "Hogwarts!" I stepped out of the fireplace in the Defense Against the Dark Arts office. I declined his offer of a sandwich and fled immediately, dragging my trunk down the stairs towards the first floor. Passing the entrance hall, I heard the sound of flapping wings. Hedwig landed affectionately on my arm. The note was gone. "You still want credit?" I laughed angrily, poking her forehead. "Why was the person who came Professor Lockhart?" "Isn't that what you hoped for, Potter?" A smirky, silky voice suddenly rang out. I turned my head. Professor Snape and Professor Sprout were walking out of the Great Hall. Snape stared at me mockingly from a distance, curling his lip. "All students take the train as usual. Only the noble Mr. Potter requires a somewhat unusual mode of travel. Is that right? Making a professor pick you up personally, you really are stealing the spotlight," he scoffed. "Why does the entrance turn into a wall as soon as you arrive? Could the delicate Mr. Potter explain?" Someone is deliberately targeting me," I said dryly. I was already in a bad mood after being pestered by Lockhart, and now he started mocking me without even asking what happened. This annoyed me extremely. Of course. After all, standing before me is the famous Mr. Potter," he drawled, his tone so oily I wanted to punch him. His black eyes swept over me, then his face hardened again, and he strode away with billowing robes. I stood there bewildered. Such a temper. Professor Sprout was still standing there. She looked at me kindly, hesitated, then said thoughtfully, "Harry, perhaps you should go apologize." I frowned in disbelief. Apologize? For what? Professor Sprout touched her bracelet of grass leaves. Her helpless look. Of course, just now, when your owl flew into the Great Hall, the professors were all listening to Albus speak. Your owl flew right towards the head table. She paused. The problem is, Severus thought the note was for him. Oh no. I fell silent. I could imagine the scene. A bunch of professors in a meeting. Hedwig flies in,
Snape, recognizing the owl he had seen in my room, stands up, perhaps unconsciously reaching out, thinking I was calling for him in my time of need, and then Hedwig faithfully flies right past Snape and gives the note to Albus. Public humiliation, rejection. I lowered my head with an look of utter misery. My first reaction at the station had been to write to Snape, but I stopped myself. I thought that since he intended to make a clean break after the summer, it was better to keep our relationship distant. So I addressed it to Dumbledore. I had tried to be considerate, and I had spectacularly failed. With my 39 years of experience in being petty and seeking revenge for the smallest grievance, I guarantee, faced with such an embarrassing situation, he would absolutely take severe revenge on the person who embarrassed him. This time, I was afraid I would die a miserable death in potions class.
As soon as the new term started, the students of Hogwarts noticed something different. If first-year Harry Potter had been in hell mode, then second-year Harry Potter was in ultra-misery hell mode. The Gryffindor rubies had been black since day one, never returning to positive numbers. I also had to go to the Slytherin head of house's office every afternoon and evening I didn't have class, ostensibly because Professor Snape was kindly giving me remedial potions lessons. But the terrifying part was the silence. Whether it was Professor Dumbledore or other professors such as McGonagall, they all fell into a strange, apprehensive silence. They didn't intervene or plead for me from time to time like they did in my first year. It was as if they were walking on eggshells around the potions master. Students from all four houses were curious to death, but no matter how they probed, they couldn't find out what had happened. Even Weasley and Granger didn't know the full extent of the disaster. No, I won't say it. I firmly refused the umpteenth wave of curious classmates today, then squeezed out of the crowd. Are you kidding? My life was already in dire straits. If I dared to reveal the incident that embarrassed Snape, the Hedwig fiasco, I would probably be strangled alive by himself. Couldn't they see the atmosphere in Hogwarts was weird this term? Even Albus didn't dare to cross him right now. I muttered inwardly. The real reason was probably that Albus hadn't arranged any specific hero plans for Harry Potter in his second year, so he allowed Snape to torment me as a form of stress relief. Resigned to my fate, I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked towards the dungeons. Process these 3 buckets of ingredients today. After opening the door, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ever since that day, he had worn this clouded expression whenever he faced me. I habitually sat down in front of the ingredients, put down my bag, and started putting on dragonhide gloves. Flobber worms, dead frogs, centipede legs. The ingredients to be processed recently were truly as disgusting as possible. He was really scraping the bottom of the barrel. I sighed, but started working without complaint. Beside me, Snape sat behind his desk, grading homework in silence. The potions office was so quiet that one could almost hear our breathing, along with the sound of his quill scratching harshly across the parchment. The atmosphere was extremely eerie. I could guarantee with my keen hearing that those poor assignments were all receiving a T. I twitched the corner of my mouth helplessly. Usually, he would at least try every means to mock me, but this time he didn't say one superfluous word. Knowing my own character, I was well aware that he was truly angry this time. Humiliation was the one thing Severus Snape could not forgive. I'd been worried before about Snape getting close to me. Now he was completely cold-faced towards me. I didn't know if this was good or bad. In the end, the feeling of not letting Snape get close to a Potter prevailed, and I tacitly accepted this strange atmosphere. I held my ground and didn't apologize. That night, I returned to Gryffindor Tower exhausted just before curfew. Fortunately, Weasley hadn't slept yet and had left me some bread and mashed potatoes. I had never been so grateful to this redhead boy. I was starving. Snape had no intention of providing dinner. If it were me, refraining from poisoning stupid Potter was already the limit. Expecting me to be kind enough to provide food? A brainless troll should starve for a few meals to sober up. I ate bread while secretly lighting a Lumos with my wand. By the faint light, I opened the black diary and began my daily communication with Riddle. Abby, when will you be free? Riddle asked this question again. Still have to wait 2 days. There's too much homework at the start of term. I'm so tired at night, I don't have time to go release the snake you mentioned. I took another bite of bread. Speaking of which, I was really startled.
After school started, Riddle urged me to open the chamber. After I made excuses, he attempted to control my body. I pretended to fall and knock myself out to stop him. But waking up with that hollow feeling, it made my heart palpitate. Obviously, Riddle was becoming increasingly impatient. I planned to get rid of this diary as soon as possible. I could only wait until this Saturday to act after making full preparations. The weather on Saturday was very good. Many students chose to sit by the lake, very leisurely. With such weather, I was also in a somewhat cheerful mood. Unfortunately, Snape had sinister intentions. He sent a senior Slytherin to notify me. Potter, Professor Snape said you don't need to go to the dungeons for remedial potions today. Filch needs a hand, so go help him. The senior emphasized help him with a smirk. I shrugged with relief. Sorry, please tell Professor Snape that I have to go to the headmaster's office all day today. Professor Dumbledore needs me for something. That's right, my full preparations meant finding backup. I currently had the body of a 12-year-old. If Riddle fought back desperately, I feared I would be powerless. And since there was a powerful backup right there, why not use him? I watched the senior Slytherin's expression change from surprised to pity, then turned and left. Looks like tomorrow will be even harder, I muttered inwardly. Snape would definitely double the torment tomorrow for skipping Filch's detention. I stopped thinking about it, shouldered my bag containing Riddle's diary, and climbed the stairs towards the headmaster's office. Come in. I didn't dare be late, I replied cautiously, composing myself as I walked in. Opposite Dumbledore was a chair prepared for me. I sat down and handed over the diary. This is what you spoke of. Dumbledore took the diary, his eyes becoming grave. Yes, the soul inside keeps wanting me to open the Chamber of Secrets and release a basilisk. These past few days, he even wanted to control my body. I couldn't resist on my own. I lowered my head, feigning shame. I'm sorry, Professor Dumbledore. I didn't say it from the beginning. Don't be afraid, Dumbledore said gently, though I sensed the underlying reprimand. Harry, you grew up at your aunt's house, so you didn't know it's best not to touch dark magical objects like this. It's not your fault. My heart tightened. To deal with him, we'd better make some changes. Dumbledore raised his wand. The portraits blurred, the familiar decorations vanished, turning into 4 gray, empty walls. The desk and chairs disappeared. Powerful transformation, I praised sincerely. The office now looked somewhat similar to the Chamber of Secrets. Now you can call him out, Dumbledore signaled. I nodded. I opened the diary and wrote in excited scribbles. Tom, I've found the place you mentioned, and I've called Harry Potter over. What should I do next? The diary reacted immediately. Oh, Abby, you're wonderful. Now I need to appear for a while. You might feel a bit uncomfortable, but don't be afraid. I need to borrow your power to appear and chant a spell to release the snake and make it recognize you as master. Dumbledore looked at the dialogue, glanced knowingly at me, and then looked anxiously at the corner of the room. It's okay. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time, I wrote. Me too. Tom Riddle's handwriting didn't fade this time, but began to brighten slowly. A figure gradually solidified from emptiness. I watched calmly, feeling that palpitation of weakness appear again. Was Tom Riddle draining my life force? I couldn't help but glance at Dumbledore.
A lean figure with black hair gradually solidified from the mist. His physique was somewhere between a teenager and a young man, his features handsome and noble in a sharp, almost cruel way. A haughty sneer curled at the corners of his lips, and he looked at me with a hint of disgust. Wow, Abby, he said softly. He raised his arms, clasping his fingers together in an elegant thinking pose before his chest. We finally meet. Hello, Tom, I responded, suppressing the surge of revulsion. Gazed by those familiar, cold eyes, my mind couldn't help but tense up. My instincts screamed a warning. There was a fatal sense of danger about this young Tom Riddle, a raw potential that the snake-faced monster he became had lost. I'm finally out, Tom sighed with emotion, stretching his spectral arms. His expression froze for a moment when he saw Dumbledore standing nearby, but he calmly retracted that hint of arrogance, smoothing his features into a mask of polite deference. Then he tilted his head in confusion, looking back at me with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. This is Harry Potter, Abby.
I don't recall you saying Harry Potter was this old. Indeed, not that old, I answered, feigning a calm I didn't feel as the draining sensation intensified. Because I am Harry Potter, I said dryly. Tom was stunned. His pupils contracted into slits, and his handsome face twisted terribly. You dared to deceive me? He hissed, anger replacing the charm. I looked at him without speaking. Deceiving you was the easy part, Tom. Dumbledore spoke up in the right moment, drawing Riddle's attention. Tom, we haven't seen each other for a long time either. Aren't you going to say hello? Only then did Tom Riddle turn his gaze over. He bowed slightly in a polite and impeccable gesture of greeting. Professor Dumbledore, he said with a somewhat reluctant smile. Dumbledore's eyes were filled with complexity and emotion. Tom, I didn't expect that after so many years we would meet under such circumstances. I was somewhat surprised inwardly. Did Albus actually know this version of Tom Riddle? Neither did I. Tom turned his head and glanced at me again. Although that look was plain and unremarkable, I vaguely felt that Tom Riddle was furious. The drain on my life force spiked, leaving me feeling somewhat weak all over. Tom, do you remember why you became this way? Dumbledore asked gently. I felt this wasn't a good question. Riddle lowered his eyelids, his expression became sorrowful, an expression perfectly calculated to evoke sympathy from a teacher. I don't remember, he said sadly. I only know I stayed in the diary for a long time, long enough to almost drive me mad. He looked at me with hurt eyes. Then I met you, Abby, or rather Harry Potter. I was especially happy. I treated you as a good friend to confide in, but I didn't expect you were deceiving me all along. I scoffed. But you wanted to release a basilisk and expected me to believe it was a docile little snake? To me, it is indeed a docile and lovely friend. I didn't lie to you. Friend? Dumbledore asked abruptly. Then Tom, all those years ago, have we wronged Rubeus Hagrid? 50 years ago, you reported that a creature raised by Rubeus attacked and killed a girl. But I always believed an acromantula couldn't cause such a clean death. Only a basilisk has that ability. Tom paused before answering. That was just an accident. He actually admitted it. It was also very remorseful, so it hasn't come out since then. Then why do you want to release it now? I asked, feeling dizzy. Don't say it's to help me. Tom fell silent. Dumbledore stopped beating around the bush. Tom, you are borrowing Harry's life force to appear, aren't you? Could you please return to the diary? Tom Riddle interrupted, a mocking sneer appearing. I can finally have my own body. Why should I go back? My face became expressionless. Tom, what do you mean? Don't you understand? Don't you feel anything wrong with your body by now? Once I finish absorbing your life force, I will have a body. Harry Potter, thank you so much. As if responding to his words, I swayed. I stumbled backwards and fell to the ground, my legs giving out. My breathing became rapid. One hand weakly clutched the diary, the other pressing against my chest. You... Suddenly, a black figure appeared silently by the empty corner of the wall. Tom Riddle turned his head abruptly, shocked. He hadn't noticed there was another person here at all, but the figure ignored him completely. Face ashen, Severus Snape walked up to me without a word. He glared down at me fiercely, then began waving his wand, rapidly chanting diagnostic spells. As the red lights of the diagnosis appeared, his face grew darker and darker. Professor Snape, how come you... I asked, bracing myself. Had he been there from the start? Shut up, Potter. He ground out, his voice so cold it could freeze the air. I sat stiffly, daring not to move. Professor Snape? Tom Riddle asked with interest. You are the Snape that both Harry and Abby are fighting to like? Harry Potter, your taste isn't very high. Snape looked confused, but glared at me anyway. Tom, Dumbledore's voice thundered. What has blinded your eyes to think you can kill Harry right in front of me? The magic in the room began to boil. Dumbledore raised his wand. A red light flew towards Riddle. It passed right through him, landing harmlessly on the wall. He was still a memory, unharmed. Snape gripped his wand, his expression sinking. Riddle gave Snape an indifferent glance, then looked at Dumbledore with a gentle, mocking smile. But where do you have the energy to deal with me, Dumbledore? He turned around abruptly, raised his arms high, and hissed loudly at the huge stone statue on the wall, part of Dumbledore's transfiguration. Hatchapes, speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four. The atmosphere changed. However, nothing happened. Tom's expression froze. He raised his voice and hissed again with full momentum. "Hatchapes, speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four." The room was silent. Impossible. Tom stared at the stone figure in shock. Could someone else have changed the password? He muttered in agitation. "Impossible. I am the only one who can open this door." "That's not necessarily true. I can speak Parseltine too," I couldn't help interrupting. Riddle's murderous gaze shot towards me, his eyes turning scarlet. "You again, Harry Potter!" "Potter, keep your mouth shut," Snape tightened my wrist. I was slumping further, my face pale. Snape was powerless to stop the drain. He had never hated his own helplessness as much as he did now.
After Dumbledore and I exchanged a brief, tacit look, I clutched my chest dramatically and collapsed weakly, curling up on the floor. My breathing became increasingly rapid and shallow. It was a performance, but the drain on my life force was real enough to make it convincing. Snape's face changed slightly. I saw him rush forward, abandoning his usual stoicism. He half knelt in front of me, his lips moving frantically as he silently cast successive restorative spells. They had no effect whatsoever. The drain was spiritual, not physical. I choked on the emotion I was preparing to express. Unable to reject my own kindness in this moment, I gave Snape a complicated look, then recomposed myself. I lay on the floor, asking weakly and with difficulty, "Why do you want to release the Basilisk so badly? Are you trying to find Voldemort?" After all, in my conversations with Tom Riddle, he was always beating around the bush, prying for information about Death Eaters and the Dark Lord. "Harry, perhaps you have considered that Voldemort was not born with that name," Dumbledore said, his tone implying something deeper. His sharp blue eyes behind the half-moon spectacles stared at Tom. "You mean?" I feigned incredulity. Dumbledore looked at the black-haired young man with a profound gaze and said no more. Tom Riddle gave himself a name, and he would indeed become the Voldemort who terrified the wizarding world. But this Tom trapped in the diary looked at most like a teenager. Was he the Voldemort who had escaped in spirit form half a year ago, or was he truly just a teenage Riddle? If the latter, how had a 16-year-old managed to preserve his soul so perfectly? Dumbledore already had a guess in his mind, Horcruxes, but there were still doubts. "Tom, have you given up on the Philosopher's Stone and switched to absorbing others' life force?" Dumbledore asked again, tentatively. "If I had to choose, I'd rather pick a stone that can grant immortality over a student who could die at any moment. If you want it, I can give it to you." Dumbledore glanced at me lying weak on the floor. A flash of red passed through Tom Riddle's eyes, but he quickly calmed down. "Such pie-in-the-sky promises can't compare to what I already have in hand. Especially coming from you, Dumbledore, it's even less believable. If there really were such a stone, why hadn't I heard even a whisper of rumors before?" A fleeting look of gratification flashed through Dumbledore's eyes. He had figured it out. This Riddle knew nothing of the stone because he was a memory from before its creation, or at least before its fame. I also had a sudden realization. This was a Horcrux. The room fell into silence. Tom Riddle's gaze swept over the dying Harry Potter on the floor, and the smile on his lips widened. Although he didn't know why they were delaying and not attacking, Tom Riddle was happy with it. Harry Potter was dying. As long as he delayed a little longer, he could possess a physical body. The temptation was too great. "Harry Potter, just as Dumbledore said, I am not looking for Voldemort." Tom Riddle narrowed his eyes, speaking again to stall for time. "I am Voldemort." Seeing me lying on the ground struggling for breath, apparently helpless, Tom Riddle felt delighted. He was happy to mercifully let me understand before I died. He raised his hand and beckoned. My wand flew out of my robes. I offered no resistance at all, looking as if I didn't even have the strength to struggle. Snape reacted immediately to intercept, casting a shield charm, but the wand still landed in Tom Riddle's hand. His figure had basically solidified. Waving the wand, he rode in the air. A line of fiery, blood-red writing floated there. Tom Marvolo Riddle.
He waved the wand again, and the letters rearranged themselves. I am Lord Voldemort. Both Snape's and my expressions darkened. Now you know, Potter, Tom said gleefully. He discreetly examined his nearly solid form and tightened his grip on the wand. But what can you do to me? His gaze turned to Dumbledore, on guard. My face paled a few shades more. Put that way, Merlin's pants. What had I been saying to the Dark Lord all these days? I had been whining about homework and asking for dating advice to Lord Voldemort. Then why didn't I stop you from absorbing Harry's life force, Tom? Dumbledore asked, calmly, steady as a rock. He glanced indifferently at me again. Isn't it because you couldn't? Tom Riddle retorted arrogantly. Of course it's because... Dumbledore paused. Suddenly, the wand in Tom Riddle's hand struggled violently, wanting to fly away. Expelliarmus. The power of that nonverbal spell was astonishingly strong. Tom Riddle was shocked, his face darkening as he hurriedly gripped the wand tight with both hands. But in the next moment, the dying Harry beside him suddenly moved with the agility of a striking snake. I pulled the basilisk fang from my robes, where I had hidden it all along, and stabbed it viciously into the diary I had been clutching in my other hand. Squelch! A large amount of ink immediately gushed out of the diary like black blood. Green smoke began to rise from the puncture, screaming. No! Tom Riddle screamed, caught off guard. The reversal was too dramatic. Did you think we didn't notice the diary is your main body and thought I was about to die and couldn't do anything? I stood up briskly, wiping ink from my hand. I raised an eyebrow leisurely as I asked. With the connection severed, my life force replenished in an instant. My face was now rosy, completely devoid of the half-dead appearance from just now. Snape's face was dark. He stood by stunned. With a clatter, the wand slipped from the hand of the figure that had suddenly become semi-transparent and was summoned back into my hand. The reason Professor Dumbledore wasn't in a hurry is, I waved the diary and the snake fang, continuing to explain lightly, we were just getting information out of you. Harry Potter, you deceived me again. Tom Riddle glared at me with shock and rage. He hated Harry Potter to the core now. First the Abbey deception, now this. Although it was a bit risky, Dumbledore clasped his hands, revealing an admiring expression, Harry's courage and daring amaze me. This very risky action was something we had decided in a few brief eye exchanges earlier. It seems our tacit understanding is quite good, Dumbledore said with satisfaction, waving his wand to change the headmaster's office back to normal. You... guys... Tom Riddle looked unwillingly at the changes around him, finally realizing he had been thoroughly played by a child and an old man. The semi-transparent figure grew fainter and fainter. As ink stopped flowing from the diary, Tom Riddle finally vanished with a wail. The portraits on the walls sighed of relief. I pulled out the snake fang and casually tucked it along with the destroyed diary back into my robes. I didn't expect that dealing with the diary this time would reveal such an astonishing truth. How on earth did he do it? A Horcrux? At 16? Harry, how do you feel now? Dumbledore asked with concern. Excellent, I replied in a good mood, tucking my wand back into my robes. After this teenage Dark Lord was eliminated, I realized belatedly I might have already destroyed a Horcrux. Very happy, are you? A sinister voice suddenly rang out. Snape's face was terrible. He sneered with a gloomy expression. Such good tacit understanding, Potter. I almost want to applaud you. He was still standing where I had been lying, glaring at me with a terrifying aura. His face was so dark it looked like a storm was brewing. This appearance was much uglier than when he had been publicly stood up by Hedwig a few days ago. Bad. I turned my head, screaming internally that this was not good. Snape might have been chaotic due to concern earlier, but I couldn't explain to him when I was feigning weakness. It wasn't that the drain on life force was fake, it was just that I was long accustomed to the Crucius curse. This soft feeling of draining was child's play, so I could endure it without affecting my combat ability, instead of being like a real child paralyzed by it. That was why Snape felt he had been played. He felt his concern had been manipulated. Professor Snape, it's not what you think. I was just feeling a bit bad, not as bad as it looked. I mean, I did it too. I felt the more I explained, the less clear it became. I really only became that agile when my life force was replenished. But this was tantamount to playing himself for the second time. Was explaining now really still useful? Snape sneered again with an ashen face, saying sarcastically, "To deal with the Dark Lord, I understand." He spun around abruptly. The hem of his black robes whipped me viciously across the face, stinging my cheek. Then Snape stormed out of the headmaster's office with aggressive strides, his robes billowing like thunderclouds. Bad. I took a few steps back, rubbing my face and looking at Dumbledore for help. "Don't look at me. Severus scolds even me when he's angry." Dumbledore chuckled unhelpfully. My face fell. I listlessly conjured a chair and sat down. "Harry, aren't you going to explain?" Dumbledore was somewhat surprised. "Severus hasn't gone far yet." This was putting it mildly. Actually, Snape was probably still waiting outside the door for an explanation, or waiting for me to leave so he could hex me. "No." My voice remained listless. "I've offended him deeply anyway." Dumbledore silently felt the chill at the door intensify. "That's not important. I have something more important to tell you, Professor Dumbledore." I tried hard to pull Dumbledore's attention back. "What do you want to say, Harry?" Dumbledore sat back behind his desk. I hesitated for a moment, then asked frankly, "Professor Dumbledore, have you ever investigated the object known as a Horcrux?"
I sat in the conjured chair, the wood hard against my back, staring at the slightly ajar door through which my former self had just stormed. "Severus shouldn't have gone far yet," Dumbledore said, his voice laced with a tactful suggestion that I should perhaps go after him. I didn't move. I knew exactly where he was. He would be standing right outside, fuming at the stone gargoyles, his arms crossed, his aura cold and heavy. He was waiting for the boy who supposedly had affection for him to rush out and apologize. But I couldn't do that, not if I wanted the charade to work. "Not going, that's not important," I said, my voice indifferent. I infused my tone with an impatience to get to the real topic, deliberately discarding his feelings like used parchment. I could practically feel the temperature drop outside the door. My face grew gloomy. I knew him. I knew me. He was currently spiraling. He was tallying the humiliations. First the Hedwig incident, now this dismissal. He was likely digging his fingernails into his palms, mocking himself for ever thinking a Potter, even a strange one, could actually care for a greasy old bat. Good, I thought grimly. Hate me. Feel humiliated. It is better than the alternative. If he thought I was just playing games, he would be angry. But if he heard what I was about to say next, he would understand. He would realize that my coldness wasn't rejection, it was a farewell. The diary just now was a Horcrux. Professor Dumbledore, I suggest you look up this term. I have seen records regarding it in some books. It seems to be an evil magic that splits the soul. Dumbledore replied, his voice also pitched slightly higher. He knew Severus was listening. Harry, do you think Tom sealed his own soul inside the diary? And I think there is more than one, I stated as a fact. If that one was made when he was a teenager, then up until he disappeared, imagine how many he could have made. My tone was calm and certain. Outside the door, I knew Severus would believe it immediately. He had already accepted that I came from the future thanks to the Veritaserum. A silence followed. Then, Dumbledore changed his tone, asking kindly and somewhat delightedly, Harry, you were very brave today. Your timing was impeccable. It really surprised me. I tensed. Albus was suspicious. My performance had been too perfect, too rational for a 12-year-old. Professor, this is also what I want to tell you next, I said, letting my voice sound diffident, dry with feigned nervousness. What is it? Dumbledore raised his voice appropriately. He was signaling the man outside. Listen closely, Severus. I gripped my wand inside my sleeve. I imagined the man on the other side of the door bracing himself. Professor Snape knows about this too.
I'm sorry, I was afraid you wouldn't believe me if I told you, so I kept it hidden. I lowered my voice to a shy whisper, painting the picture of a scared child burdened with terrible knowledge. Actually, I know some things about the future. I sped up, cutting off any potential questions from Dumbledore. I know there are several Horcruxes. As long as they are not destroyed, Voldemort won't truly die in the end, because the other Horcruxes were destroyed by you in my timeline. I don't know the quantity. I only know the whereabouts of 2 other Horcruxes. Dumbledore's silence, digesting this. It was a long while before he asked solemnly, his voice somewhat hoarse, "What are they?" "One is a great white snake that Voldemort tames later, called Nagini." I paused. I looked at the closed door. I visualized the man standing there. The man that I used to be, the man that I was trying to save from a lifetime of guilt. And there is one more. My voice suddenly became calm, dead calm. "It's me." A strange, suffocating silence fell over the headmaster's office. The portraits stopped their whispering. The air grew thin. "What?" Dumbledore asked back quickly, his composure cracking. "I'm sorry, Harry, you said you are what?" I knew Snape's heart outside the door was sinking into the ice. "I said it is me, Professor Dumbledore." I spoke steadily, without a single ripple of fear or resentment. I had accepted this destiny decades ago. "I am the last Horcrux." "So you mean..." Dumbledore seemed unable to bear saying the next words. He hadn't yet reached the ruthless pragmatism he would develop in later years. "You must die." I imagined the man outside. I imagined him standing stiff as a statue, his senses slowly leaving him as the words hit him. "Yes," I said with incomparable calm. "I must die." "Do you understand now, Severus?" I thought, projecting my will through the oak door. "Do you understand why I pulled away? Why Harry Potter stopped saying he liked you, why I humiliated you to keep you at a distance, why I wanted our relationship to be cold as ice? It wasn't because I despised you. It wasn't because I was playing games. It was because I am a dead man walking. And I knew with absolute certainty that the man standing outside the door had just been struck by this truth like a bolt of lightning. He would connect the dots. He would rewrite the narrative of the last few months in his head. He wouldn't see a fickle boy anymore. He would see a tragedy. And for Severus Snape, tragedy was the only language of love he understood.